On today's special Trading Ratings episode, Dan and I will be ranking movies with notable soundtracks. Right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews. I am your host, Brandon Griffiths. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. And of course, I've got my brother-in-law, Dan, on the line as well. And we're going to just kind of go into what we're talking about with these movies and their soundtracks and all of that stuff.
Yeah, so when we're talking about soundtracks, we're talking about the music that goes along with the movie, sometimes released as a separate album or can just be part of the movie. Maybe it's a score, maybe it's commercial songs that have been specifically selected for the movie. Sometimes it's songs that are written for the movie. A lot of different possibilities here, so looking forward to diving into talking about some of these movies and their associated soundtracks. I feel like this one could be a long episode. I have so much to say about so many things. Since we're also talking about music in this one, in addition to the movies, I'm pretty excited about it. How about you?
I'm excited. I'm very nervous now that you've given your explanation. I was worried about this going in, that the definition of soundtrack to me, the way I interpret that in a modern sense is a soundtrack is something different from a score. Like it's like a separate thing to me entirely. It's like a movie can have a score and a soundtrack, and those two are not usually the same thing. It's like there are, on a soundtrack, you've got all of these individual songs, often made by different artists and things like that. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. But then there are scores where it's like a big composition that spans the entire length of the movie and typically doesn't have vocals or anything like that. It just has instrumentation, orchestration, things like that. But I mean, so are you lumping in scores into this?
So I specifically didn't want to talk about that ahead of time because I thought it'd be a fun to see how you settled on your list and whether or not you included that kind of stuff. Because I ping ponged in my head back and forth between, like, am I talking about just like a good soundtrack that I would listen to in my car without even having the movie running, right? Or am I talking about scores like Danny Elfman or Howard Shore or Alan Silvestri and some of these pretty famous people who have done, who are really well known for scoring movies, like in and of themselves, right? The scores in some cases elevate the movie. In some cases, it's just, they're known for their scores. And in a few even, I do know of people who listen to just the score, like Howard Shore's score of The Lord of the Rings. I have friends who listen to that. Or Danny Elfman's Batman score, as opposed to the Prince music album that goes along with. There's like two different, to your point, there's like two different versions of the Batman soundtrack, right? You've got the Danny Elfman score and you've got the Prince pop music version. And then you've got even other movies where the soundtrack in its entirety might not be particularly noteworthy, but there was like one song that they wrote for it for the credit sequence that sold 1 billion records or whatever. Like, Celine Dion comes to mind from Titanic, right? Right. They featured My Heart Will Go On that soundtrack. And I couldn't tell you if the rest of the soundtrack is like just a score or what. I just know that one song and it sold 1 billion copies.
Right. And I know like that one specifically I think of and I'm like, God, I haven't seen Titanic in a very long time, but I remember being so sick of My Heart Will Go On by the end of that fucking movie. Cause it's just like every scene is like punctuated with this Celine Dion, and I'm like, it's not a bad song. It's like it's a decent song, but it's like, holy shit, you've got a 3-hour movie. Like, come on.
Right.
So
right.
yeah,
and so that was another thing that I kind of, my list ends up being a little bit all over the board. I ultimately, spoiler alert, I don't have any scores on my list that I did, mainly because I just don't have a whole lot to say about them other than like Danny Elfman's awesome, right? But
Right. I mean, thank
um,
fucking God, because I was gonna say the same. Like, if I was to include scores in my list, I would have an entirely different list
yeah,
altogether. Like, it would just not
yes,
even be the same at all. And I mean,
yes,
like, because I mean, honestly, like, so many, like, not always, but so many times, if a song or if a movie has a really good soundtrack, it's like it doesn't usually go too hard on the score. You know what I mean? It's like it's usually one or the other. There are obviously exceptions, but it's like for the most part, a movie has a good soundtrack or it has a good score, and that's kind of where I like. So that's what I did. I did what I refer to as soundtracks, which is like pop songs,
right,
basically
yep.
featured in a movie. So I mean, like I'm glad we're on the same page with that because I was definitely like because I'm thinking like, oh my god, there are so many movies. If I was doing scores, I would have picked for this movie or for this episode that it's like holy shit. So I
Well,
mean, yeah.
and as I was scouring, the internet and stuff, trying to brainstorm like what movies I might want to include, I went from like, hey, I think this is going to be a good idea to like super excited about all these different movies that we could talk about to like overwhelmed and like
Right.
I don't know what I want to include here and I did have a really hard time whittling this down to 6 movies to talk about. I'm curious to see if one of ours is an overlap. I think there's one very potential overlap that we're gonna have.
Yeah, I think I know what one you're thinking of, but
Um,
yeah.
but ultimately I settled on, as I kind of mentioned earlier, like a soundtrack that I would listen to in the car, just the music, pop in the CD back in the days of CD players, and like just listen to that music, right? That compilation of songs,
Mhm.
along with, or I should say, and or a movie where it was specifically elevated by its soundtrack. Like, I don't know that I would necessarily listen to the what, and I'm particularly talking about one of the movies on my list, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But like, the music itself isn't necessarily a compilation that I would necessarily buy and listen to, but watching the movie with the music, the way they use
Mm.
the music in the movie, like the movie wouldn't be the same without it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yep.
it hinges on its soundtrack used in a very specific way that makes it amazing.
Yeah, there are certain
So
songs that I seriously only really enjoy when I'm watching the movie that they accompany. Like there are some songs that I'm like I mean Chris Cornell recorded the theme to Casino Royale, the James Bond movie, and it's like I really enjoy the song as I'm watching the movie and they do the opening credits and stuff, but I tried to put it on like a playlist to just listen to and it just I couldn't vibe to it. Like I couldn't even get into it. It was just like I like you, Chris Cornell. I think you're a talented, or you were a talented musician, but it's like the song is just it's
right,
of its movie, you know.
right. But all that being said, I'm going to have a very long list of also mentions at the end of this because there are a bunch of movies that I came across that I don't know where else we'll ever talk about them. But
Oh yeah,
that I
right.
was going to note, and some of them might show up on later lists. But yeah, so with that, why don't you start us off? What's your first one? What's your worst one?
My first movie, and I kind of made it a point to pick some movies that I'm not a big. I didn't want to have them all be really great movies in my mind that were just terrific and just I can't get enough of them. But the first one I chose was Suicide Squad from 2016, starring Will Smith and Margot Robbie, among many others. And I gave this a firm D rating because honestly, this movie is very problematic. It's so brief synopsis: a group of supervillains is assembled to defeat a new threat to humanity. And this is how I'll put this. So, this is a bad movie. It seemingly has a really great soundtrack at face value, but it's also a bad soundtrack in that I don't feel as though most of these songs really suit their scenes very well despite being mostly enjoyable songs on a pure music level. I hear these songs and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I really like this." This basically like I would say this movie feels like a playlist I would make where it's like I grab a little bit of everything for my playlist. I would go from like Johnny Cash to Taylor Swift to Eminem to, all of these random artists from different time periods and genres. And it's like, I would just throw them on a playlist and listen to them because I really enjoy it. But I don't think that really works for most movies. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on here. So there are moments where these songs play, especially in the beginning as they introduce characters, and it either feels like the songs either don't fit at all or like they're almost obvious choices or overdone choices. Like the House of the Rising Sun plays when we meet Will Smith's character. And honestly, the scene that he's in where it's playing, it's like I didn't need any music whatsoever. It would have suited it better. It would have seemed more appropriate to not have music, and they just play the House of the Rising Sun. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess the subject matter of the song, the House of the Rising Sun, it like kind of makes sense, but it's like, to me, it just feels out of place.
So real quick, are you talking Suicide Squad or The Suicide Squad? Just to be
Suicide
clear.
Squad from 2016.
Okay.
Yes. So, yes, I'm sorry I have to make that distinction because filmmakers don't know how to fucking title movies. So it's like they're afraid to have the number 2 in a sequel. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, this is the first one. And so it's basically like DC never really had their shit together. So they just kind of were like, oh, this would be a fun movie to make. Let's do this. And then there's a scene where the Suicide Squad, they've been assembled. Everybody's getting ready in this prison courtyard or whatever the fuck it is. And it's like they're playing Without Me by Eminem. And it's like you can't help but feel like it almost sounds like, in the context of the movie, like someone just randomly turned on a radio station and played whatever was on at the time for the scene. It doesn't do anything to the scene. It's just like, okay. But apparently most of these pop songs weren't going to be in the director's cut of the movie, and they've never released the director's cut, but apparently it was going to be pure orchestral scoring, and it was going to be like, I mean, there's only a teensy bit of the score coming through in this movie at all. And there are just certain little scenes where they play just instrumentation, and it's like I wouldn't go so far as to say it would be like it's like a really good score, but it's just it would have to be better. It would just, oh my god.
Yeah, so, sometimes I wonder too how much of that stuff is the result of studio pressure. Like, did the director and filmmaker want to include all those songs versus a score? Or was the studio like, hey, we've got an opportunity for a cash grab here, and let's cram in as many, hot pop stars as we can, and recognizable songs and whatever, and then sell, a bunch of soundtracks as well, or use it almost as a gimmick.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing is, I have to assume, they say that the director's cut was going to be no pop songs whatsoever, so it was like all scoring, and it was like, okay, like I can see where they wanted to like, okay, let's bring in some of these more popular, well-known songs and have them just kind of set the mood and things like that, and maybe make it a little more modern or something. I don't know, but I mean, honestly, like most of the songs aren't very modern either, so it doesn't really help that. But I mean, aside from just the horribly inappropriate music choices, it's like you've got these. The basic premise of this movie, this is why there are so many things that this movie does wrong. And it's like the score is one, or the soundtrack is one of them, but it's like it doesn't, the premise, the basic premise of the movie is, okay, this is what we're dealing with. We've got the concern of, okay, the example they use is, what if Superman went nuts and decided he was going to kill the president? What would we do if that happened? And their answer is this Suicide Squad, this Task Force X thing that they call it. And it's like, none of the people that are in this group, of all the people I could think of, it's like none of them have significant enough powers that if Superman decided he was going to kill the president, they're actually going to be able to intervene and even slow him down from doing that. So it's like, and like, this is probably just my nerdiness shining through, but like Batman has a plan for at least every member of the Justice League, if they did this, if they had this happen where Superman wants to kill the president, for instance, and it's like he has a plan, like he has his kryptonite, he has, like he has a little thing in the back of his head. Okay, this is what I would do if this shit happened. And so, but they don't. I mean, they don't even acknowledge that, and it's just like they want to allow their premise to not be ridiculous. But it's like,
and as I recall, when he did need to stop Superman, ultimately he just had to remind him his mother's name, right? Something like that.
Right,
and then everything came crashing down.
Right, and of course it's safe to assume that in that moment, Batman's holding a kryptonite spear to Superman's neck, and he's gonna kill him. And if Superman's mother's name would have been Judy, Batman would have just murdered him right in that moment. He wouldn't even have slowed down a little bit. It would have just been like, oh yeah, well, this is normal. It can only be if our mother's name is the same. But yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff going on in this movie. Like, I mean, the way they introduce these characters in this movie, and they've all got their little theme songs or whatever. And I mean, it's just, they got these graphics on the screen. They're trying to be badass, but it just falls flat for me. I mean, I think
it fell flat for most.
Yeah, it probably, and I mean,
I haven't watched it in a long time, but I recall that it felt very, very, very gimmicky, like very ham-handed. A lot of almost posing for the camera.
Oh yeah,
a
lot of
stuff,
what
I mean?
Yeah. Like, absolutely.
Like just I don't know. It was what didn't even feel like a real movie.
No, right, and I mean that's the thing is it's like not even to the point of like could you defeat Superman with these characters, but it's like Harley Quinn. What does this Harley Quinn character bring to the table that no one else could bring? What is her even skill, not metahuman power, but like what is her skill? What is she doing that is going to defeat anybody? I mean, they face off against this enchantress, and it's like, what are they able to do that Joe Blow off the street couldn't fucking do? Like, it's insane to me. And I mean, I didn't like the Suicide Squad either, but there's the only other thing I have to mention with this movie, because it's so insane to me, is okay, so there's the character Killer Croc, and he is a Batman villain, right? And you might not remember this if it's been a while since you've seen it. Maybe you do, though, because it kind of sticks out. Basically, Killer Croc in this movie is just like a caricature, like the most stereotypical black person. Like it's just like, it's so offensive to me. Like they're like making their deals at the end when they, spoiler alert, win the battle with the Enchantress, and Will Smith wants to see his daughter, and Harley Quinn wants an espresso machine, and Killer Croc, no joke, wants BET. That is what he asks for, is and it's like, but the choice, the soundtrack point, it's like, what did they play what would you think if they're going to make this horrible, offensive version of this character? What do they pick for the song to introduce him with? Fortunate Son by CCR. And it's like, what? Get the fuck out of here. Like, no, this does not, no. So it's like, yeah, I just, watching this movie, oh man, I am just in a fit of rage the entire time I watch it. Like, I can't fucking stand it.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think the premise by itself is bad enough. And it's like, if they would have executed a little better, it might not have, I might have been able to forgive some of the shortcomings of the plot and stuff, but they just did such a bad job that it's like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I don't ever need to see this. Like, it's just so fucking bad.
So what's your grade?
It's a D. It's
really? I thought D. For sure you were going to say E after that rant. So
here's this is my logic, and this might be idiotic, but okay. So my logic is, I never give a movie an E grade if I can stand to sit through watching it a second time or more. Like, I don't like Suicide Squad, but I will watch the movie again. That's what's dumb about it.
You'll hate watch it?
I will hate watch it because it's, I mean, like, I mean, honestly, there's a couple different movies on this that I've done episodes for that I haven't released yet, and Suicide Squad is one of them. And it's like, I mean, I sat through it and it was like, oh my fucking God, there's so much to talk about with this movie, and it's all bad. I mean, I had very little in the way of positive things to talk about with this movie. But yeah, that's what I got for Suicide Squad. I'll stop rambling for a minute and let you have your turn on your first movie.
Okay, so it's interesting what you say about how to define an E, right? And being something that you don't want to sit through again. Because one thing, and this is only the third episode of these that we've done, but
Right.
one thing that I've already found difficult, even though we made it a point, like we want to talk about bad movies too, because it's fun to talk about bad movies. But I find it difficult when I'm putting a list together to settle on an E movie, because all of the potential E movies, I'm like, I don't want to sit through it and watch it again,
Right.
and take notes. And like, but then again, I don't want to have necessarily something that like, I saw it 20 years ago. As I recall, it wasn't very good, but I don't really have anything to say about it other than it wasn't very good. And then that's not interesting either. Right. So
Right.
like, I've got this whole list of potential movies to watch, and I have like a little subsection of bad movies. And I even like started to look for Dangerous Minds. And then I was like, man, I don't want to sit through that movie. Like,
No.
I just don't want to do it. Like, I
don't even remember
being,
anything in that movie, honestly.
I recall it like, other than Coolio Gangsta's Paradise, being like the
Right.
huge song out of it. Like, I remember it being in seventh grade and everybody thought it was super cool, that movie, even though it was
Yeah.
obviously bad. And the older I got, the more I looked back on it as like, I remember Michelle Pfeiffer karate chops a Mexican kid at one point, and suddenly everybody thinks she's super cool. And like,
Oh my God.
I'm like, I just remember that movie being beyond terrible. But then I was like, I don't want to pay $4 in rent and sit and like lose 2 hours of my life on this.
I can't blame you for that. Yeah.
So ultimately, I found a movie where I was like, I've never actually seen this movie, though I'm familiar with the soundtrack, and I imagine it's going to be an E. And by the way, this was before I listened to your episode about Ocean's 11 and Ninja Turtles, where you actually mentioned this movie and about how you assume it's terrible, but you don't want to watch it.
Oh,
this
God.
is Coneheads.
Oh,
1993's Coneheads,
Jesus.
starring Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin, with cameos from like the entire early 90s Saturday Night Live cast, it seems like, plus a whole bunch of other people. Like, all these people just keep popping up. I mean, I was like writing in the margins as people kept popping onto the screen in little itty bitty roles, from old SNL people like Garrett Morris to, as of 1993, like current ones like Tim Meadows, Julia Sweeney, Adam Sandler, Kevin Nealon, Phil Hartman, John Lovitz, David Spade, Chris Farley. And then you have other people like Michael Richards, aka Kramer, Tom Arnold, Eddie Griffin, Sinbad, Michael McKean,
Jesus,
Jason
all these people are in
Alexander.
this movie?
Yes.
Holy shit.
And the daughter is played by Michelle Burke, and her friends are Joey Lauren Adams and Parker Posey. And they had all that same year, all three of them had been in Dazed and Confused.
Right. Yep.
So like, it seems like it was one of those movies where, 20 years later, Dan Aykroyd said, hey, let's revive the Coneheads characters from the 70s and Saturday Night Live. And everybody on Earth was like, oh, we want to be a part of that. To the extent that it's almost distracting, right? With all these people who keep popping in.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so I turned that on. It was available on HBO Max, so I didn't have to watch it. Or I mean, I didn't have to pay for it. I was already subscribed. And I kind of had it on in the background, fully anticipating that it was going to be awful. And it was. I mean, it was pretty bad. The shtick was just like, these cheap gags. Like, he burns his mouth on pizza, and so he grabs a bottle of Windex to squirt it in his mouth to cool it off, and they like zoom in on the fact that it's Windex, and it's just like super shitty cheap gags like that over and over and over again, right?
Oh, God.
Like, within the first 90 seconds of the movie, you're like, okay, I get it, I'm over it.
Yeah.
Right? But then a couple of strange things happen, and maybe it's just because my expectations were so low, but two people actually elevate this movie from an E to a D. As much as I was expecting to give it an E, I ultimately gave it a D. because Chris Farley steals the scene every time he shows up. Like every facial expression, every line that he has is like full on Chris Farley, and like his over the top yet subtle Chris Farley, like when the way he moves his head and like bobs his head and stuff. And it's in his facial expressions. Like it's hard to explain without seeing it, but I can't help but giggle watching Chris Farley do his thing. And then similarly, David Spade plays like something between his Hollywood Minute persona and his annoying receptionist character on Saturday Night Live, if you remember that at all, where like he's constantly sucking up to the boss, and he's kind of like constantly trying to keep other people away from the boss. So he works for the INS, what's INS stand for? The
Immigration and Naturalization Service.
Yes, there you go. So they're like border patrol, but not like police. They're border patrol, like, you know, a government agency, right? And he plays this like suck up deputy / receptionist kind of role thing, and it's him doing his David Spade thing in a really good way, and he's kind of funny. And then a third thing happened that I had to rewind it and watch it again. It was so funny. The first time you see Michael McKean, he's explaining a new border defense system to, I don't know, some other government people or whatever. And they open the scene and he's saying, "Might I remind you, these figures aren't to scale." And it's like he's got these G.I. Joes on a map of Texas or something. And he proceeds to talk about this system where they're going to deport illegal immigrants back to Mexico with a shock collar. And then they're going to bury an electric fence under the border. And so if they try and cross over again, they light on fire. Wow. Basically. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, this might have been really ridiculously stupid 10 years ago. But in the time between this, when this movie was made and now, we happen to have actually had a situation where I could see this guy explaining this to a specific former president of the U.S. and that president going, "Huh, that's a good idea. We should try that." And having to be reminded that these G.I. Joes are not to scale. They're not actually 700 miles tall.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, so like that was a really weird scene. But why is this movie on here? Because the soundtrack is absolutely excellent. A lot of like early 90s music, not just early 90s, but like 80s music. The early 90s one, or mid 90s, I should say, the real standout on this soundtrack is a Red Hot Chili Peppers song called "Soul to Squeeze." Now, I'm not the biggest Chili Peppers fan in the world, but I really like their early 90s stuff, like up to and including the album One Hot Minute. After that, that was the one that had Dave Navarro playing guitar on it. After that, my personal opinion, and I know I'm not the only person that feels this way, but I'm probably in the minority. To me, everything after that album that they ever made sounds exactly the same. And in fact, they kind of sound like shittier versions of "Soul to Squeeze," which was an excellent song. But to me, like everything on Californication and later just kind of sounded like regurgitating the same song every time.
Am I correct in that I've gathered in the past that basically this is like directly correlated with their drug use, and then basically they fall off the wagon when they stopped using drugs, or is that not a thing? Maybe I'm just making that up. I don't know.
I don't know enough about their history to know that. Honestly, I know that various band members have had huge drug problems. In fact, the original guitarist, I think died of an overdose. But yeah, so "Soul to Squeeze," it's honestly my favorite Red Hot Chili Pepper song. It's not actually found on any of their albums. I think it was a B-side on something originally, one of their hits, but it ended up being on this soundtrack, and you hear it a couple of times during the movie, but they ended up releasing it as its own single after the movie. Great song. It's got "Tainted Love" is on it. "Magic Carpet Ride" is on it. Though it's not Steppenwolf's version, it's somebody else doing it.
Is "Tainted Love" the soft cell version, or is
yes, it's soft cell. And like all the teenagers are singing that in the car at one point. So it's an excellent. REM's on it, Paul Simon's on it, Bare Naked Ladies are on it, Diggable Planets are on it. Excellent soundtrack, shitty movie, but stunningly not as ridiculously shitty as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I could see
I mean,
that.
I wouldn't I wouldn't defend it, but my grade is a D overall for it.
Okay. That's
I
fair.
don't recommend watching it. If you weren't planning on watching it, don't watch it.
No, no. I mean, like that. See, that's the thing is, like, I don't know if I got into it with when I was talking about it on the Ocean's 11 Ninja Turtles episode, but like Dan Aykroyd, like I don't dislike Dan Aykroyd. I think he's a funny guy and he does a lot of funny things. But like, there's like just basically any movie that he is like the sole writer of, I am horrified by. Like, he was in a movie with
He
Chevy
wrote
Chase,
Ghostbusters, didn't he?
but not by himself.
Ah, okay.
So there's nobody to like water down his insanity. But he did write this movie called Nothing But Trouble with Chevy Chase and Demi Moore. And honestly, I can never condone anybody watching that movie. It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen by a fucking mile, honestly. Like, it's so fucking bad. It's just got really a bunch of gross shit in it. And there's nothing that's terribly funny about it. And it's just, my God. I mean, just
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about him.
I don't know either, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Though there's something like inherently kind of unlikable about him for some reason.
Yeah.
Even though he's been in stuff that I really like, he himself isn't enough to bring me to something.
I mean, for instance, Ghostbusters. What's the weirdest part in the movie Ghostbusters? Where he's getting blown by a ghost. He's laying in bed and a ghost unzips his pants and gives him a BJ. And it's like, why is this in this movie? Like, what? Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know. So that's where I'm at with Dan Aykroyd, honestly.
Okay. Well, I don't have much else to say about Coneheads. There's only so much you can say about a movie like Coneheads.
Right. Okay.
So back over to you, I suppose. Oh, and by the way, one other little note. I could not find anything on the entire internet to verify this, nor could I find anything in the credits or anything. But I swear O.J. Simpson pops in the very last scene or one of the last scenes for like a split second. Maybe it's just a guy who kind of looked like O.J. Simpson, but I swear it was O.J. Simpson. I could not find anything verifying that.
It wouldn't be like unreasonable to assume he might be in it, because I mean he was in like the Naked Gun movies,
right? And this would have been right around that time where he was in
so
Naked
it's
Gun.
like
Yeah,
that would make sense. So yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting. Okay, so so my next movie is Team America: World Police from 2004. Starring Trey Parker and Matt Stone and a bunch of others. You know, obviously those guys did South Park and a bunch of others, the Book of Mormon plays and stuff like that. So the rating I gave this one is a C, and the only reason for that is just like, I'll get into it, but basically the brief synopsis is a specialized counterterrorism force recruits a Broadway star to help them infiltrate a group of Middle Eastern rebels.
So when you said Team America, my first thought was like, I don't remember that soundtrack. And then I looked it up and immediately started laughing to myself about all these movies or all these songs that I had completely forgotten about.
Oh God. Like, it was funny because it was like, I was really like racking my brain because I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm a little top heavy on the movies I like. So I'm like, I want to kind of bring it down a little bit because it's like, so I mean, honestly, I do love this movie. It's definitely one that I have to be in the mood for to fully enjoy because it's legitimately dumb as shit. Like, honestly, it's dumb in a good way. But
yes, and it's dumb in a great way.
I mean, all the characters in this movie, all the characters are puppets for fuck's sake. I mean,
like marionette puppets.
Marionette puppets. Yes, they're not like, oh my God. So
not like Sesame Street puppets. They're marionette puppets.
Right. And it's like, it's also horribly offensive in a lot of ways. And I mean, deliberately so. Like, it's not like Trey Parker and Matt Stone didn't know what they were doing when they made this movie. But it's like, to go back to it and watch it, it's like, some of the stuff you're like, God, like, yeah, that's a bit much.
Just look at the names of the songs, right? Everyone has AIDS. America, fuck yeah. Dirk-a Dirk, the terrorist theme. I'm so Ronry with an R, which is Kim Jong-il singing about how Ronry he is.
Right.
Which itself is could you even get away with that now?
Right. I don't even think so. I mean, and the flick is just, it's pure satire. It's just top to bottom satire, and it mocks action movies really well. It uses that mockery to take shots at America's views on terrorism, and no one is off limits, and it's pretty fucking well done, but it's completely ridiculous. And I guess one thing I will say about it is like I've seen it pointed out about this movie before, and in a lot of like South Park episodes and stuff, where they're making fun of stuff, but it's basically like they're not taking a stand and saying this is. They're never saying what is right. They're just pointing the finger at everybody. You know, they're saying, "Oh, Michael Moore is terrible for this," or you know, like
they're just making fun of everyone on the horizon.
Yeah, nothing is safe, and basically, yeah, you don't get a vibe from them that they like have a ideal setup in mind.
Not even Matt Damon was was off the table for being made fun of for like no reason at all.
Well, and do you know what the story is behind that Matt Damon puppet?
No, I don't.
So they had all these celebrities in mind that they were going to make puppets of, and when they made the Matt Damon puppet, they looked at it and they said, that puppet looks stupid. Like just really stupid. Like to the point that they were going to have Matt Damon's character be this super intelligent celebrity, and like he was going to be like a voice of reason for them, and they were like, we can't do it. Look at this fucking puppet. All he's gonna say is Matt Damon, and that's it. Like it's so fucking funny though. Like I mean, it's just so these funny choices that get made that it's like, holy shit. But there's a song that plays while the protagonist Gary is trying to decide if he should join Team America and help them out, and it's called Freedom Isn't Free, and it's this country music parody. It's, you know, all of those super patriotic country
Toby
songs.
Keith,
yeah,
Toby Keith
right,
parody.
right. Absolutely. And so it's like it's hilarious, you know. I mean, it's a very funny song, you know. I mean, just and they hit the beats of country songs so well with it. You know, it's got the right instrumentation, it's got the right vocal sound to it. It sounds perfect to me. And I mean, the running gag of this entire movie is that Team America is just constantly intervening to prevent terrorist attacks and then essentially causing more destruction than the terrorists would have if Team America hadn't shown up at all. And it's like, honestly, despite the puppets being like deliberately dumb, they seemingly went all out on making the sets look really fucking good. And I mean, like they definitely spent some money on this movie, but it was, I can't help but focus on the songs, even though the movie, I don't think the movie is nothing without the songs. It's like you get a song like, and I won't do this in any other movie I talk about today, but there is a song where they have a sex scene between these two puppets.
It's a gratuitous marionette sex scene.
Right,
They're like shitting on each other.
Right. Yes. And I mean, and so this song is called Only a Woman. And one of the lyrics, or, you know, like the second verse of the song is, I like rain, I like ham, I like you. You're around, you're right here, so you'll do. I want to tell you how much I love your mind, but it simply isn't true. And that's the fucking verse of this. Like, I mean, it's fucking great, but it sounds like a song that would play during a sex scene in an action movie. Like, I mean, it's fucking hysterical. It's so, you know, obviously the puppets, they play up the difficulty manipulating the puppets, and they make that more ridiculous. But my favorite song of this whole movie has to be this one that's called The End of an Act. Now, do you know what that one is, Dan, by chance?
No, I don't remember that one.
Okay, so this is the one where it's basically like a love ballad that is written, and it is likening how much this singer misses somebody, and it's likening it to how much the movie Pearl Harbor sucked and how terrible it was. And like, I mean, it's just like, I miss you like Ben Affleck needs acting school. He was terrible in that film. I need you like Cuba Gooding needed a bigger part. Like, it's just all these stupid things. And it's like, holy shit, like, how the fuck did you come up with this as like an idea to put in a song? But I mean, you know, it's like, so there are so many funny songs. And like, as soon as I saw it, because I was like looking through my movies, trying to think of a good soundtrack to like kind of just like get that last one on my list. And it was like, holy shit, I've got to do Team America. Like, there's no way I can get out of this, because it's like, it's so fucking hysterical. I mean, like, Trey Parker could literally be a songwriter. If he tried to like write real songs, like he could probably be a solid musician. I mean, they have their own band, yes, but I mean,
and they wrote the Book of Mormon, right? It's like
right.
Tony Award-winning musical.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, that's the thing is it's like, so I mean, they're very well written songs, and I mean the movie. I mean, it's taking shots at celebrities that are getting too involved in politics and trying to be the voice of reason for everybody in the world, and I mean, just the whole movie is great. It's just there's so much that I don't think would fly today, as you mentioned. That it's like, yeah, I mean, like that's the only thing that really kept this movie at a lower rating, and it's especially that it's in relation, like relative to the other movies on this list, that I'm like, okay, I like these other movies significantly more than Team America, and Team America is definitely in the mood kind of movie. So I mean, but it definitely great soundtrack, one of the high points of the movie, honestly. Fucking love it.
So was that a C or what?
That was a C, yes.
Okay, that was my guess. Right. All right, so my next one is another not very good movie. Not certainly not as good as Team America. I'm still at a D, and this is actually the first movie that I wanted to include on here anyway, so I started at a D. It's the movie She's the One. It's written and directed by Edward Burns, and also starring Edward Burns. It's got Frasier's dad, John Maloney, Marty Crane. It's got Cameron Diaz and Jennifer Aniston, Michael McGlone, Maxine Bonds. It's a low budget, supposed to be like I think it's supposed to be a rom-com, though the com was pretty non-existent, at least as far as like any real laughs. So I don't know, maybe it's just a drama. Maybe I just saw Jennifer Aniston and Cameron Diaz on the cover and assumed it was a rom-com. Right. But it's on here though because the soundtrack, the entire it's basically a Tom Petty album, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Right.
It was the follow-up more or less to Wildflowers, which in my opinion is the greatest album he ever recorded and one of my personal favorite albums of all time. And a couple of years after that album came out, it came out during a relative some downtime for Tom Petty. Like he had just had this explosive creative run with Rick Rubin that turned into Wildflowers, and it was originally going to be like a double or triple LP, and the record company talked him into just keeping it a single LP to sell more copies, which I think was ultimately the right move. But you ended up with like all these other songs that were super good songs that he, as somebody as prolific as someone like Tom Petty over their career is going to have all these songs, right? But basically he took a bunch of those songs and reworked them and provided the soundtrack for this movie. Somehow he had met Edward Burns or something and kind of got roped into doing the soundtrack. And then he got, I guess, from what I was reading about it, he was like the studio wanted him to bring in like other artists to help out. And he immediately was like, I don't want to do that. And then he tried to back out of the whole thing. And then Jimmy Iovine, a super producer, produced everything from early Tom Petty records to NWA and everything in between. He talked him into like just sticking through it and, do it anyway. You already got the material. I heard the record. It's pretty good. And the record in and of itself is actually really good, in my opinion. It was a total commercial flop, but it's personal opinion, it's his most underrated album he ever released. There's some excellent songs on it. But then it ended up, the CD came out like 6 months before the movie did because the movie got delayed. So like there wasn't any real marketing behind it. It got put in like the soundtrack bin instead of the Tom Petty bin in a lot of record stores. And like ultimately he followed up like this, multiple 3 or 4 time platinum album with an album that like sold a couple 100,000 copies or something. And so all that to say that it's an excellent album in and of itself, but just criminally overlooked. It even has my favorite Tom Petty song of all time on it, Angel Dream, which is not nothing being a huge Tom Petty fan that I am, but I had never actually watched the movie. And so I finally sat down and watched the movie for this effort here. And I got to tell you, it wasn't good. No. It was, in fact, really bad. I won't quite give it an E. I think I'm being generous giving it a D, though. My notes on it are like everybody in the entire movie is unlikable. Like, I don't understand how any of the characters can stand to be around each other. Like, it's basically, it's about these two brothers, and one of them is like a super successful Wall Street banker or whatever, and the other one is I think he works in a toll booth or something. He's he's very blue collar, doesn't make, or no, he's a cab driver. That's what he is. Sorry, he's a cab driver, and they're very different. He's the cab driver is actually the main character played by Edward Burns. He's like super impulsive. Right at the beginning of the movie, he gives this girl a ride to the airport because she's got to go to a wedding in New Orleans, and then he ends up driving her there and marrying her on the spot, which you don't actually see any of that. Just she says, "Hey, why don't you come with me?" And then like cut to the next scene, they are telling Marty Crane that they got married, and it's just very bizarre. And like it kind of falls into that trap too of like you don't really understand how any of these people would have ever liked each other to begin with, let alone well enough to like still be together and still be hanging out with each other, other than I guess the two brothers are like, they have to be because they're family. But even then you're like, why do these guys even bother hanging out with each other? They clearly don't like being around each other, like fundamentally. But right. Meanwhile, the rich brother, he's married to Jennifer Aniston, but like is having like super like is becoming estranged with her, I guess, so to speak, because he's having an affair with Cameron Diaz, who is his brother's ex-fiance. So it's like this weird, like these overlapping love triangles kind of thing. And I also have a note here. How is Cameron Diaz an A-lister? I mean, I get that she was hot stuff and whatever, but like she is such a bad actress in everything she's in. I don't get it.
Yeah.
She's so just not believable. And her character, she's like a high-end prostitute, apparently, for like Wall Street people. And the brother who's like in love with her and wants to leave Jennifer Aniston with her somehow doesn't realize that she's a prostitute, even though it's blatantly obvious and everybody else knows it. And I don't know, it's just filled with these little like poorly edited things where it's like, I'm not buying this. You know what I mean? I don't buy that they're in love. I don't buy that he doesn't understand she's a prostitute. I don't buy this. I don't buy that. There were a couple of funny lines, like when Marty Crane, who's like an old man Catholic Boston guy, he's like, he gets all upset about, the marriage or whatever. And they're like, you don't even believe in God. And he yells, it doesn't mean I stop being a good Catholic. And that was kind of funny. But I mean, like, that was it. There were a couple of funny moments. Overall, it was terrible. They have a lot of weirdly casual arguments that, like, I don't know. There were scenes that felt like it was trying to almost be Clerks, but with a bigger budget, both in terms of like the dialogue, heavy dialogue, as well as like really shitty acting, but instead of it being like someone's, just high school buddies, which is what Clerks was, it's like A-list celebrities acting super, super poorly, right?
Wow,
like,
yeah.
Maybe not all A-list. In fact, I have one note. Jennifer Aniston, despite like her performance wasn't anything special, but she came off as like an Oscar-worthy actor compared to everybody else around her. Like she's the only character in the movie that didn't seem weirdly robotic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was one of the, I never really thought much of her like acting in general, other than like she just always kind of played some version of Rachel, until I saw this movie and I was like, wow, she really can act in the way that bad actors are all around her, and she actually seems natural here. Like,
yeah.
So I gave it a generous D. I don't have much else to say about it. Included more to be able to talk about the music album than anything else, which I highly, highly recommend checking out if you like Tom Petty.
Yeah, and that had to hurt the sales of that album, and that it was a soundtrack, and that it's it's like you look at it. I mean, like if I looked at it and it's like, especially if it's to a movie that's not good or that hasn't come out yet or you haven't heard about. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't give a shit. But it's like if you just release a Tom Petty album called She's the One and say, oh, it also serves as the soundtrack to this movie, but don't worry about that because it's not bad like this movie is. I mean, it's so I mean, that's, and it's weird. Like I know the name Edward Burns, but I had to look him up to see what he looked like, and I don't recognize him from anything.
I know I've seen him in stuff, but and apparently he's actually written and directed a few movies.
Okay.
But this one's not very good. And apparently he's even written and directed a few other movies about these same characters, which I don't know why. I mean, it was terrible. Why would you try and do it again?
Yeah, no shit.
But it does have some really good songs on it. It's got, like I said, it's got Angel Dream. which is my favorite Tom Petty song of all time. And also the name of the re-release album that they just came out with a couple years ago is like a record store day release on vinyl. It's like kind of a remastered, reimagined version of this album, and they called it Angel Dream. It's got Hope You Never, which is a good song. The lead single on it was Walls, which you might remember. It's an okay song. It's not the best. Hung Up and Overdue is a great song. And that is one other note that I'll make. Watching the movie, they do actually use the songs throughout the movie, and it was almost distracting for me because I like this album so much. Every time I heard it, I would just start singing along with the record rather than watching the scene.
Yeah. Oh,
but, yeah. So that's that one. I give it a D. Not much else to say, and I mean it this time. So over to you for your next one.
Okay, so my next one is Dazed and Confused from 1993.
Mentioned just earlier.
Yes, just mentioned. Yes. So this one has Jason London, who you might have seen in the movie Out Cold. He hasn't been in a ton of shit that I really remember. His twin brother was in Mallrats, and I thought that was him. Yeah. So I thought it was the same guy, obviously, but nope, not so much. So then there's also just this laundry list of fucking up and coming stars in this movie that like clearly were never heard of before this movie came out. I mean, you've got Matthew McConaughey, Ben Affleck. I mean, just this endless stream. I mean, obviously they're not all like mega stars or anything, but like they're people that you recognize. Yeah. Oh yeah, they're big. They're notable names for sure. And I mean, it's just so it's like I
feel like everybody other than the main character went on to become like big movie stars.
Well, so that's the one. Okay, so Jason London plays Randall Pink Floyd, and then the other character that I would point to and say is like a main character in this movie is the character Mitch, and I think his name is like Wiley Wiggins or something. Apparently he like went on to be like a game designer or something. I don't know if it's like video games or board games.
Well, he was the one that I was thinking of as far as like he was like one of the main characters, and he didn't really go on to do anything else. I don't think he did
not at all.
He was a terrible actor in that movie.
But he's really bad. Yeah.
Around him, like you said, were like Matthew McConaughey, Ben Affleck, Parker Posey, Mila Jovovich.
Whoa, hold on a minute. Mila Jovovich. It's Jovovich.
Joey Lauren Adams. Yoey Lauren Adams.
I mean, Mila Jovovich is foreign. She has a right to pronounce her name differently. Anyway, so every scene in this movie is just laced with these really memorable 70s hits. And honestly, I don't normally say this, but this movie's quality would probably be greatly affected if they hadn't really gone all in on a good soundtrack. Like, it wouldn't have been like a terrible movie, but it's like, holy shit, these fucking songs bring this movie to life, and it's just fucking amazing. I mean, they're really well-known songs. It's not like they chose deep cuts or something to maybe save money or whatever. And it's like, I mean, there's just the only thing I'll say is a lot of them, I feel like you could like easily swap the song that they chose out for another 70s song, and it would probably fit the scene just as well, if not better. And it's just like, but I mean, like, essentially my only real gripe with this movie is like, there's barely a plot here. I mean, there is the freshman hazing by the seniors, right?
Yeah.
You know, the guys are going around paddling the new freshmen, and then the girls are like, I mean, the girls' shit is like fucking psychological. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, they're making these girls lay in this parking lot, and fucking they're putting food on like flour or powdered sugar or something, and like cornflakes and eggs and shit. And it's like, what is this? And like, the one overarching thing other than the hazing is that Randall gets this letter from his football coaches, that they want him to sign because it says that like he's not going to do drugs or other illegal activities. And that's his big gripe throughout this movie. But it's like, for the most part, you're just watching a movie about the lives of a bunch of different groups of high schoolers. You're seeing kind of what they do, but you're not getting a big narrative, you know? And I mean,
it's sort of like just kind of a snippet in time, right? They
right,
drop you in as they're all transitioning from the school year to, like, seniors or freshmen, or depending on which group you're following in the moment, and
right,
they're all on their way to, like, the end of the year big party, like, that's out in a field or under the water tower or something,
right.
and then they pull you out, like, after the
Yeah,
party's over and everything, like, it's just kind of this day in the life during, like, a very transitional period for the main characters.
right. Yeah,
and
and I mean,
and yeah, there's really not a plot, I guess, but I don't know, I always enjoyed this movie.
oh yeah, I definitely enjoy
It's a
it
great
for
movie.
sure. Yeah, and I mean, like,
I wouldn't
but
say great.
yeah, I mean,
I think it's a good movie.
it's a solid movie. Yes, so I mean, like Ben Affleck plays this great douchebag that's like the senior that got held back, and he's like getting to do this hazing again, paddling all these freshman asses for like another year, So it's like, but it's like he plays such a great douchebag, and it's like you kind of get to see how much everybody hates him, and you get to see his comeuppance and all this stuff, and Matthew McConaughey plays this sleazy guy that's like still hanging out with high schoolers, but he says a lot of hilarious stuff, I mean, just
One of the most classic all-time roles was that
oh yeah,
character.
so fucking great. I mean, honestly, like, I mean, he says the line about like what he likes about high school girls, how he keeps getting older and they stay the same age. So it's like, it's just like clearly like he's a sleazebag. Like
Yeah.
he's not a good guy, but it's like he's funny in this movie, and it's like
He's such a likable sleazebag.
oh yeah, exactly. And I mean, I love I mean the soundtrack. It's just like holy shit. Like I can't believe they fucking have these songs in here. Like I mean, just they just keep coming one after another. And I mean, the only one I would say, like for instance, that like I talked about how a lot of these could be swapped out for other songs and things like that. But I don't necessarily feel that they needed to be. But like one for instance would be like they play Hurricane by Bob Dylan. And I love the song Hurricane by Bob Dylan, but it's like, it doesn't, I feel like they could have swapped it out with any number of 70s songs and it would have suited. Like they go to this emporium where everybody's playing pool and hanging out and stuff. And it's like, they play Hurricane. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess it would, if it's just they're playing the radio at this emporium, then it would make sense. But like to me, it could have been like so many other songs, I mean, it could have been like Funk 49 by James Gang, or like I mean anything. I mean just like I mean like Bang a Gong, Smoke on the Water. I mean any of these songs that don't get featured in this movie that you think of when you think of like 70s rock songs. And I mean the big one, the masterpiece of this movie, I would say, is the scene where the main, or one of the main characters, Mitch, he's basically accepting his fate that he's going to get paddled by this group of seniors, and they like the audio of like the natural sound cuts out from the scene, and we just hear No More Mr. Nice Guy by Alice Cooper, and it's fucking great. I mean, it's just a very well concocted scene, and it's like Affleck is like going way too fucking hard paddling him, and he's like way too fucking into it. But I mean, it's a well delivered scene, and the music, it is fucking perfect for it, honestly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. I mean, basically, like we said, it's just a glimpse into the lives of these kids in '76, and it's like it's a solid movie. It's not like above and beyond. It's not like epic levels of greatness or anything. It's just a solid movie. It's enjoyable to watch. I always find it funny that Mila Jovovich's character is on the poster for a lot. Like, I think there are probably posters that came out after this movie got popular, and she got popular because she's on the cover and she has like one notable scene where she's like playing a guitar and singing the song, and that's it. Like she doesn't do anything in this movie at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do feel like it's very grounded and it feels very genuine. It's good, and it's fun to just put on every once in a while, and you obviously listen to the tunes and stuff, but it's really enjoyable. I like this one. So I mean that's what I got. I gave it a B rating.
A B rating.
Yep.
I would agree with that. I'd give it a B.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next one, this is actually the one where I thought we might have an overlap.
Oh, okay.
But since you're already at B and you didn't mention this movie, I'm going to guess that this movie isn't on your list.
Okay.
But my next one Let's make sure I didn't skip one like I did last time. Nope. Okay. All right. I have this movie as a C. Batman Forever.
Oh, okay. I can
I'll
see where you would
pause
have
here
thought
I'll pause for a reaction here.
that. Yes. I can see where you would have thought I would have brought up Batman Forever, but
I mean, first of all, the soundtrack, right? Why is Batman Forever on my list? Because this soundtrack was, in my opinion, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. As far as like, it's one of the first soundtracks I remember. Like when it came out, it was like I ran out and got the CD, right? Because of the music that was on it. Not to be confused with the score, right? This is another one of those, much like the original one, where there's like the score that has the music that's actually in the movie, and then the soundtrack, which has the movie poster on the CD cover, a song that played during the credits, and then just a bunch of other songs. Like it's like a separate media entity that just shared an ad campaign or something. But it had a whole bunch of music from like big time stars at the time. Probably most notably Kiss from a Rose by Seal. That was a huge single. And that was off this movie. That one still to this day seems to pop up in pop culture references. But it also had Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me by U2, which I think itself was its own single. It had Smash It Up by The Offspring. It had The Passenger by Michael Hutchence from In Excess. That's actually an Iggy Pop cover, but the Michael Hutchence version is actually like kind of haunting and really good. I really like it. I think I like it better than the Iggy Pop version, actually, surprisingly enough. And then also a song that I feel like has been forgotten by time, but actually might be my favorite song on the album. Method Man does a song called The Riddler, and it's all about the Riddler, and it's fantastic. It's all about the Riddler and his riddles. And if you haven't listened to it lately, dig it up and give it a spin, and you'll be like, man, that is a good tune. Excellent.
No, wait, did you mention in that long list of songs, did you mention Bad Days by Flaming Lips?
I did not.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to.
I actually had forgotten about that one. I don't think I've listened to that one in years.
I love that one. It's solid. Anyway, I'll let you continue. I'm sorry. I had to interject with that.
Well, and there's PJ Harvey, Brandy, Massive Attack, Mazzy Star, Nick Cave, The Flaming Lips, like you said, Sunny Day Real Estate, etc. It's like peppered with big names. Excellent soundtrack. Unfortunately, the movie is not as good as the soundtrack. So this is one where in my head, I really liked this movie when I was a kid. I thought it was super fun. I enjoyed it. Several years ago, it came up in conversation with some other friends who do movie series podcasts. In fact, you were featured on one episode, the Gobeski Wallace Report, right? They were doing their what did they call it? The Merry Marvel Movie March.
Yeah.
Where they were like basically going through every Marvel movie since like
Howard the Duck.
You know, even before Howard the Duck, like going all the way back, and every Marvel property that had ever been turned into a movie, basically. And at one point we were talking, and we were talking about potentially doing like a Batman series with just like all the Batman movies. And I think, as I recall, this would have been like a long time ago and in the before times even, but they were joking about how bad Batman Forever was. And I was trying to defend it. I was like, it wasn't that bad. It was a fun movie. I really liked it. And then I picked it up and I went to watch it all ready to like take notes on it and like convince them that it wasn't as bad as they thought. And I was like, no, they were right. This isn't a very good movie. And it was much, much worse than for some reason it was in my head. Now, I will say that I think Val Kilmer doesn't get enough credit as being a decent Batman. I think he was a fine Batman.
Definitely.
But unfortunately, that wasn't enough to save this movie.
Right. He was a good Batman in a bad Batman movie, let's be honest. I mean, he could have been really solid with the right movie, but he just wasn't.
Exactly. And like the bad guys in this movie are like overly cartoonish, which I think kind of works for Jim Carrey's Riddler, but it doesn't work at all for Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face. He's over the top in a bad way, in my opinion.
He's so animated, and it's like, why is like basically every other thing that Tommy Lee Jones does in Batman Forever is fucking laugh at shit. And it's like, do you know anything about the character Two-Face? Like, do you know that he's like not the guy, like he wouldn't laugh at something to save his life most of the time. Like, he's just not that guy.
Yeah. The writing wasn't very good. The editing wasn't good. It seemed really gimmicky again, like just cheap gimmicks. The sound, there was like weird baseball sound effects at one point. I think it was where the Riddler was like throwing stuff around in the Batcave. Yeah, when he's bombing the Batcave. There's a scene where Chris O'Donnell as Robin, who, by the way, was like 25 going on 30, and for some reason he needed foster parents.
Yes. Oh my God. I mean,
and it's like it made no sense. Like, why is he coming to live with Bruce Wayne as like a foster dad? Like, this is silly.
No.
And oh, by the way, do you remember the circus scene where his parents die? Bruce Wayne and Nicole Kidman show up in like a tux and a ball gown to the circus.
Yeah.
Like,
everybody's all fucking dressed up. Like, you see the mayor and shit. You see them, they're like all in these really nice dress clothes. Like, holy shit, this is a fucking circus. Like, get the fuck out of here.
It's so dumb. And then when he steals the Batmobile and he like goes to this random place in the city where it's like a bunch of ravers covered in neon paint and whatever,
like blacklight paint.
And blacklight. It's so goofy. It's like, is this a thing somewhere? And they're all thugs though. It's like a gang, right? And they just put like, I guess they carry a blacklight around with them. And then there's another note that I had. He like saves this chick from a gang rape, and then suddenly she wants to make out with him. And I remember like, and this is pre-Me Too times, and I'm watching this going like, this seems like an odd choice for this girl. Like, she just narrowly escaped a brutal gang raping, and now she wants to like make out with Chris O'Donnell. Like, I don't know.
There's also like there's this music cue when they kiss that is like, it's like this like crescendo of noise that you hear, and I don't even know what instrument makes it, but it sounds so ridiculous. It's like, oh, they finally kissed, thank God. Like, we've been dying for this for over 3 minutes. So
and like one of the other memorable things from this movie was how ridiculously fast they solve riddles. To the point where it's even like, whose brain even works that way? And they make fun of that. And there was something they made fun of that in. I want to say a South Park something or other.
Maybe.
But that and what was the other one? Independence Day, where they figure out how they can bring the alien spaceship down with a computer virus. And Jeff Goldblum was like, "Wait, what did you say? A cold? A virus?" Like a computer virus? And it's just like, one of those like out of left field. You're like, wait, what? I don't know. It's just like, this is like another example of that where they're like, it's a mystery. Mr. E. E is the 13th letter of the alphabet. That means this. It's just like, wait, what? Like, he just immediately figures this ridiculous riddle out, and he's like, it's Mr. Enigma, Edward Enigma. That's who the Riddler is. It's like, takes him 5 seconds, right?
So, okay, so this movie, I've like kind of been holding back on talking too much because I also did this was a movie that I probably would have included in this list if I hadn't just recorded an episode on it, because I'm doing like a DC series, and like I did Batman Forever, and it was just like the entire time I was just so angry, like just watching this fucking movie, because it's like that scene where all of the riddles are coming together. Basically, they're like, okay, so we're figuring out that these are all connected somehow. They all have numbers in them. Maybe those numbers are letters of the alphabet. And it's like, okay. And so they get the letters, and it's MAHE is the numbers they get. And then they ascertain that, I guess, they should just combine two of those numbers and to make that R. Just like, there's nothing, there's no clue there to make that a thing. Like, what are you getting this from? Like, get the fuck out of here.
Right. It's such a ridiculous scene. Like,
oh God.
I don't remember. I don't know. In retrospect, like, it must just be because I was only 12 years old the first time I saw this, because I don't know why I thought this was better than it was. Like, it's terrible.
Oh God. Well, and then, I mean, like, I think a big thing with this movie is like the awe and like just the sheer popularity of Jim Carrey, and how so many people were like all about Jim Carrey when this movie came out. And it was like, he's not like, I don't even like him in this movie. He's obnoxious and beyond what Jim Carrey's obnoxiousness normally is. He is obnoxious, and it's like,
Yeah.
I can't get there. And then it's like on top of that, they've got him being really like joke heavy and laughable and all this stuff. And then they make Tommy Lee Jones's character Two-Face be like that too. And it's like,
Yeah,
why?
they tried to turn Tommy Lee Jones into Jim Carrey.
Right.
And it's bizarre.
And, have you ever heard the stories of like that Jim Carrey has said in like interviews and stuff on like podcasts? Like he talks about like Tommy Lee Jones legitimately loathed him on this movie. Like he was just like, he told him that he didn't like him and that he couldn't sanction his buffoonery. And it's like, holy shit, you can't sanction his buffoonery. Like that's, oh God, that's fucking great.
Yeah,
I love it.
And then there's the overall plot with like the weird brainwave thing. It just goofy. It seemed very un-Batman-ish to me.
Yeah.
Seemed like something out of, I don't know. It was like in the wrong movie, right?
Right.
And then there's the final like showdown scene that's like out on that weird island. And so I didn't rewatch this for this one. I just referred to my previous notes from a few years ago.
Okay.
And I was pulling from that, but like there was like a big, almost like a well or something at one point, right? Like a huge vertical tunnel kind of thing, right?
Yeah, like a silo with water in the bottom, basically.
Like a silo with water in the bottom, yeah. And they like rappel down it with what's supposed to be, you know, like a bungee cord kind of thing or something. And they hit the bottom and like their spines snap. Like I remember that's the one part I remember watching as a kid and being like, how are they not dead right now? Like,
right.
Like you just see their bodies just fold backwards.
I mean, this happened to Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man, and she did not live to tell the tale. Like, come fuck on.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when Tommy Lee Jones, like, spoiler alert, you know, Batman wins in the end, but like when he goes to flip his coin like he always does, and Batman just happens to have like $20 in quarters in his pocket that he's been apparently running around with the whole time, and throws them all in the air, and Tommy Lee Jones falls to his death. It's just like why does he have $20 in quarters in his pocket? Like,
oh my God.
Oh, it's so bizarre. But
like he just knew that moment was coming. Like he knew Tommy Lee Jones was going to be standing way up high.
Yep.
Very vulnerable to this potential threat of extra coins. And I mean, it's fucking crazy.
Bizarre. I gave it a C, which, like, despite how bad it is, like, for some reason, I still find it to be kind of a fun movie. And like I said, I think Val Kilmer actually makes a good Batman. It's bad, but it's fun. Not easily defendable, but also I wouldn't give it a D or an E just because maybe it's my own personal memories of like, there's still part of me when I watch it that's 12 years old. And, like, just enjoys seeing Batman. And I mean, like let's be honest, it's no Batman and Robin, right? Like that's bad.
Right.
This is at least kind of fun. You at least don't sit there just like hating the world entirely, right?
Yeah. Right. I can agree with that. It's definitely better than Batman and Robin for sure.
Yeah. So I gave it a C. And again, that soundtrack is just classic. Love that soundtrack. It's still have it to this day on CD.
Oh yeah.
And that's all I got to say about that. That's all I got to say about Batman Forever.
Okay. So my next one is Boogie Nights from 1997. Starring Mark Wahlberg, Burt Reynolds, Julianne Moore, and a bunch of other up-and-coming stars. Maybe not quite on the level of, well, I guess it's pretty comparable to Dazed and Confused with how many stars we see, but I guess they're bigger stars. I feel like they went on to have...
most of them were already established as well in this movie.
Right. I guess.
Not all of them, but like there were a bunch of people that were already pretty established names in that. Yeah,
so... this movie is fucking amazing at creating atmosphere and scenes, and that undeniably starts with the music, of course. Mm-hmm. There's so many well-known stars on screen at any given moment, and there's just so many good performances, but it's like this music, it's just like it's a vibe. It hits differently with this music, and you like feel like you're there, you know? And there's so many people that I forget are in this movie. I always forget, like, I know this is probably blasphemous, but it's like, I even forget that Don Cheadle is in this movie.
Yes, Don Cheadle's excellent in this
Yeah,
movie.
and Alfred Molina, I always remember his scene, but I forget that it's Alfred Molina. And Thomas Jane is also, and it's like,
Yep.
I mean, like all of these people, I'm like, holy shit, how did they get all these?
And the
fucking
performances
people?
are amazing.
Oh, they
in
really
this movie.
are.
I mean, I like much like that last one. I feel like was just put out on a string for you with Batman Forever. This one, like, I can't not talk about Boogie Nights. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh yeah,
I absolutely love Boogie Nights, and the performances are brilliant. Like every single person just crushes it. The everything from like the main characters to the bit players and the cameos from like Louis Guzman and Alfred Molina's character is like so intense and amazing in that movie. That one scene that he's in, and it's so memorable. And did you know that apparently they actually put cotton in his ears in that scene because you had the Chinese guy walking around throwing firecrackers and he like doesn't even hear it practically, while all the other guys who are super nervous keep jumping every time one blows up. They actually stuffed cotton in his ears so that he wouldn't like reflexively react to the explosions.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. No,
Yeah.
I mean, there's just like, I mean, there are a lot of very memorable scenes. I mean, obviously the music, like this is one of those movies, and there obviously we're only going to have more of these on the rest of my list, but this is one of those movies that it's like, I hear the songs that are in the movie, and if I hear them outside of this movie, I only think of this movie when I hear them, even though they stand alone as good songs. It's like I hear Spill the Wine by War featuring Eric Burden, and it's like I think of that girl, you know, like you get the shot of the girl jumping into the pool and you see her underwater swimming and things like, and that's what I can picture it in my head as I'm hearing the song. And it's like, holy shit. Like, I mean, just so many great things. I mean, like you get some, as time progresses, you get a little change. And like initially it's like early 70s songs. And then it becomes like, you know, you get to the Alfred Molina part and it's like, you got, obviously, I know you're like,
well, by then they're in the 80s.
Right. And that's, and like, obviously I know you're a huge fan of the Night Ranger moments. I love that song. You know? Like,
but
I mean, it's so great.
That scene with that song is, in my opinion, might be the best, like, musically fueled scene in history. It's so good. And the tension, you can feel it. Like, it's uncomfortable to watch, you know?
Right.
And yet you can't not watch it. It's that scene is just so perfectly executed from Mark Wahlberg to Tom Jane to John C. Reilly to Alfred Molina. Like, it's just, I can't say enough good things about how brilliant that scene was.
I love the way it is presented, like, because it's like Alfred Molina has it on a mixtape. You know, it's just like this mixtape is playing and it's like he's jamming out to it, you know, and it's like all of a sudden this song kicks on and it's like
it's his awesome mixtape.
Yeah, the buildup, the natural buildup of Sister Christian is like the natural buildup of the scene, and it it accompanies it so fucking well. I mean, like they're obviously like, I mean, I feel like there are a lot of grim moments in this movie. Obviously, like
very grim.
I mean, so like it's just they're deliberately contrasted at times with like seemingly upbeat music, even though it's like genuinely awful, the stuff that's going on. You know, like it's just like you get this feeling of dread, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just so strange how they do it, because I mean, like, I feel like a lot of different movies and TV shows have like imitated that, because I don't, before this movie, I don't know how much I remember that happening in movies. And it's like, holy shit. Like, I mean, like then you take a scene, like the first scene where it's like, you know, Mark Wahlberg's character is, you know, he's going to be in his first adult film and he's got his first scene with Julianne Moore, and they deliberately have like no music, no sound whatsoever. And it's like, it's just conveying that like uncomfortable awkwardness. And it's like, it's perfect. It's like you fucking I mean,
They even use the silence to effect in that
right.
in this movie, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
it's not only is the soundtrack really good, but they so perfectly weave it into the film itself to
Right.
emphasize, like you said, emphasize dread where they need to emphasize it. Where they use silence to emphasize certain moments, like where, you know, suddenly the music stops, right? To kind of like
Oh,
convey
yeah.
the gravity of the situation. It just like throughout the entire movie, and it to your point, like, you know, about there even being kind of upbeat music and like some really terrible moments and stuff. But there's like this almost like a bell curve or a upside down V, if you will, like where the first half of the movie is like crescendoing to like, you know, their stardom and everybody's on the rise and everybody's happy and getting more and more successful. And then there's a turning point at that. And it's like it's deliberate, right? When they have the welcome to the 80s party, it's a New Year's party, and that's like the turning point that the entire movie hinges on, where that's the first party where, or the first scene where something truly completely awful really happens, right? Where
Right.
William H. Macy like does a murder suicide in the middle of the party, and then everything starts going down the other way. And then
Oh,
it
yeah.
becomes a moment of like everybody's trying to convince themselves that they're like still crushing it, you know, and doing great and whatever, but everybody's miserable. They're hooked on drugs. People are ODing, you know, and then it
Oh,
like
yeah.
by the kind of the final act where there's no pretending anymore, right? Everybody is miserable. And it's like that really ominous gong music is going and just keeps chiming. And like everybody is just completely down and out. Mark Wahlberg is turning tricks again. Julianne Moore is just totally coked out and miserable. Burt Reynolds' empire is collapsing. Like the one guy has the what was his name, the colonel or whatever, has like gone to prison for I think kiddie porn or something. Like, you know,
Yeah,
it's just
right.
like everything's
Oh, man.
collapsing around them, and even that sequence like kind of crescendos into, or maybe it's after, I don't remember, it was before or after that Alfred Molina scene that you're talking about, right? Where
Yeah.
like it's like everything comes to a head in that scene, and and by the way, John C. Reilly like
Oh, yeah.
deserved an Oscar for his role in that movie. He is
Yeah.
so next level.
Yeah.
I love John C. Reilly basically because of that movie.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's fucking amazing, and it's like, I mean, honestly, like, you know, and talking about that, it's like I feel like in the grimmest moments, unfortunately, it's when we get the least soundtrack, but it's like I feel like it's when the movie is most compelling, and it's like when it's most, you know, it's so devastating to sit and
Yeah.
watch all of these people and all of their lives are coming apart after having all of this good fortune earlier on, and I mean, just it's. Oh man, I mean, I absolutely fucking love it. Honestly, like it's just it really. I mean, it's fucking great. I guess I did.
You know, I think I've talked to you about it before, but I don't know if you have the special edition DVD. There's a version of it that came out years ago that was like a 2-disc special edition DVD set, and the second disc had nothing but like special features, and there's one of the special features on it called the John C. Reilly Files, and it's a bunch of outtakes where they like just kept the camera rolling and had him just keep riffing on his lines, and like kind of he's like ad-libbing even as they go, and they're like 5 or 10 minutes long, where he's like kind of repeating himself, but you know, where they're ultimately going to just take a snippet of it. And one of the scenes was cut entirely, but it is unbelievable how good he is in these scenes where he's like coked up and just going. And it's like, I don't know, it's amazing. Check that out alone. Like pick it up if you can and check that out. It's worth it. So what are you rating this?
I rated it an A.
So I would put this in my S tier. I think it's one of the best movies ever made.
I knew without question when I put it at A. I'm like, well, Dan's gonna have this on his, you know, like he's gonna have this at an S. Like, there's no way he doesn't. So I mean, like, I knew you love this movie that much. So
I do, and I'm a big P.T. Anderson fan, and that's probably my favorite of all the P.T. Andersons. Is that movie?
Don't I know it? Yeah. So I mean, that's one notable piece of trivia is Leonardo DiCaprio was originally offered the role of Eddie Adams / Dirk Diggler, but he had already signed on for his role in Titanic. Now, I really truly like Mark Wahlberg in this movie. but I would like to like see a version of this that has Leo from 1997.
I could
Like
totally
just
see him doing that
oh
part. I
yeah,
think Mark Wahlberg crushes it, but I
oh
think
yeah.
Leo would have done well as well. Definitely.
But yeah, that's what I got for that one. I mean, I put it in an A just because of certain other movies that I selected for my list that I couldn't knock out of the top
Well,
spot.
man, you got right to some good stuff. That was only the fourth of six as well, and you're already talking about stuff that's in my S tier. So my next one, I'm still at a B here. I'm
Okay.
working my way up to it. But my next movie, I don't have quite as much to say about it probably as those last couple. But there's a movie from 1972 called The Harder They Come, starring Jimmy Cliff. Written and directed, maybe. Yeah, written and directed by Perry Hensel. So this movie is credited for bringing reggae to the world, reggae music.
Mhm.
It was 1972. It's set in Jamaica. It's about a guy who moves from the country into the city and is immediately like robbed and loses everything. It really shows like the seedy underbelly of the city in Jamaica, because especially, I feel like still kind of to an extent to this day, and like in general pop culture, when Jamaica is referred to, it's like, Sebastian from Under the Sea and everybody's,
Cool Runnings. Don't forget that one.
cool runnings and whatever. And it's like, it's like this upbeat, everybody's happy, beaches, everybody's getting high and having a good time, whatever. When in reality, Jamaica is like one of the poorest countries in the world. It's super, super crime ridden. I think at one point it was like the highest violent crime rate in the world, like, or, maybe not the world, I don't know, but a super high violent crime rate. Rampant poverty, and like you see that in this movie, like they're not like sugarcoating life in Jamaica at all. And it's also, instead of like the cartoonish Sebastian from the Little Mermaid accent, there's actually scenes in this that they have to subtitle because it's so hard to understand what they're saying, because it's like native Jamaican, which isn't purely English. It's
Right.
like this, I don't know what it's called, or if it's just Jamaican or what, but it's like this, it's almost like they're talking backwards, it sounds like, and it's hard to explain unless you see it, but it's without subtitles you would have no idea what they were saying. Let me just put it that way. But anyway, it actually stars Jimmy Cliff, who was probably the first like international reggae star. I think he's one of only two reggae artists in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, next to Bob Marley, obviously. I mean, he wasn't as big as Bob Marley, but he was, I think, a little bit earlier in terms of like international stardom. And this, again, like I said, this movie is kind of credited as like bringing it to the world because the soundtrack, in addition to the title track, The Harder They Come, which is an excellent, excellent song. It's been covered by a million different bands over the years. It's also got like Desmond Decker on it. It's got Toots and the Maytals doing Pressure Drop. It has a couple other Jimmy Cliff songs. It's got You Can Get It If You Really Want, Sitting in Limbo. It's got Many Rivers to Cross. Also has Sweet and Dandy by the Maytals. Anyway, a lot of really good classic reggae songs. Jimmy Cliff actually wrote and performed all those songs that he did because by the time this movie came out, he had already made like 2 or 3 albums, I think. I mean, he was in Jamaica. He was already a star. But yeah, so it revolves around this guy. He comes to the city. He's immediately robbed. Like I said, he's super poor, but he's a good singer, and he's like trying to get into this music studio to make a record because he keeps trying to tell him like, hey, I can sing, I could do this, and I can make some money. And then he does cut a record, and it like becomes this huge hit in Jamaica. But at the same time, a bunch of shit happens, and he ends up like on the run from the police. He stabs a guy, he robs somebody, he does all this stuff. I think he shoots someone at one point. I think he shoots a cop, and he ends up on the run, and he's like this outlaw kind of, and like all the people like love him because, he's kind of this like larger than life character, but it happens very fast, right? Like his run is very short lived, and it ultimately ends with him getting shot 1,000 times on the beach when he gets caught by the cops finally. But it's it's kind of a classic story. It's done on like a shoestring budget. I mean, it's very, very low budget. It says it's $400,000 Jamaican dollars. I don't know what that I don't know what that translates to in US dollars,
Right.
but it definitely was made on a very small budget with like people like Jimmy Cliff, who wasn't even a real actor necessarily. But it's pretty good. I gave it a B just because it is kind of hard to watch in some ways, you know, between the super low budget and the hard to understand accents. I feel like it kind of soars on its historical significance, like in the history of reggae music and everything. So because it's like a classic in that regard, but it's good. But I would say unless you have like a real interest in that kind of music or that kind of rock and roll history, probably not for everyone. Like I said, I give it a B. I really like it. Oh, best part though, when he finally gets into the studio and he records the title track, "The Harder They Come," it's like mesmerizing. Like you can feel it. It's one long single cut where they're just showing him in the studio singing the song, and it's like it's brilliant. He just nails it, and it's like you can feel it, you know, like as he's like kind of grooving with it and everything, and sweating, you know, like he's like so into it. But I'm also a big Jimmy Cliff fan, so
Right.
he's one of my all-time favorites. Man, I don't know if this is kind of a tangent, so I apologize, but I don't know if you're this way as well. But like when I get into something, especially like a musician or, you know, a media something or other, I kind of tend to like fall down a rabbit hole in like liner notes and everything and like learning everything I can about something. So like I came upon this in kind of a weird, like roundabout way. I got really into the Clash in my early 20s, which is probably later than most, but like
Yeah.
I got super into the Clash, and there's one song where they reference this movie. And so like I wanted to learn more about it, and I started pulling the thread. And of course, by this point I was like reading biographies about the Clash and all this kind of stuff. And so I came across this movie via reading about the history of the Clash and how much they were into it and how influenced they were by Jimmy Cliff and some of this reggae music that was coming out of Jamaica in the early 70s. And then stumbled on, like I said, came across this movie, watched it, got the soundtrack, fell in love with Jimmy Cliff and his entire catalog, fell in love with Toots and the Maytals and their entire catalog, and all these other things that like I kind of came to by way of like this other stuff. Do you do the same thing when you come across stuff?
Definitely to a lesser degree than you do, because I mean, like you always talk about that, like you'll talk to me about not wanting to own things digitally or things like that because you want to buy like the CD and you want to get the liner notes and things like that so you can read up on it. And that for me, I'm not really that into it. Like to me, it's like I want to listen to the music, and it's like, or it's like with movies. I mean, obviously there are certain things that I will get really into, but I don't do that. Definitely not as much as you. I definitely do it on like a level of like, okay, this is something like Batman. I would say I really go all in on Batman, but obviously that's like a huge thing for me.
Right.
But it's like some of my most favorite musicians and bands. It's like famously, my sister, your wife, gave me a bunch of shit because I was recording an episode and I was talking about Taylor Swift, who I love very much, and I didn't even know the story behind why she was re-recording her albums.
Right.
And I didn't even know it. Like I hadn't even looked into it. You know, like I wanted to talk about that, but it was like
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like, so it's like, yeah, I guess I don't have that curiosity on that level that I just do that. But
yeah, I mean, I fall down rabbit holes, and like there's an entire section of my record collection probably that is like Clash adjacent, or that like I could trace the thread between like I started listening to this and then that took me to this, and then this person, you know, co-wrote this song, so I looked them up, and then that led me to this other thing. And like I don't know, and I mean my affinity for physical media is kind of, there's like two reasons. One of them is that I love pawing through the liner notes and like learning about it, and you know, seeing who popped in to help out with the, you know, you find somebody like played the drums on one track and you're like, holy shit, you know, so and so was on there. But then also I for whatever weird reason, I find like a satisfying physical connection to like the physical media, like of placing a record on a turntable or a CD into a CD tray, and like I don't know, it's one of those weird mental things that I can't quite explain.
Right.
But
yeah,
but I enjoy it nonetheless.
fair enough.
But yeah, so anyway, sorry, that was a long tangent sparked by a movie that I said I didn't have as much to say about. So you can feel free to cut all that out if it was not interesting. But yeah,
Quite
The Harder
okay.
They Come, 1972. It's a classic. I give it a B,
Okay.
and check it out for the soundtrack, even if the movie's hard to watch.
All right. Sounds good to me.
You've got to be up to your like S tiers at this point, right?
I'm one away from the S tier. So
Okay.
my next movie is Dirty Dancing, previously covered on this podcast, from 1987, starring Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze. How do I put this? Songs in this movie, it's like the quintessential. I hear these songs in real life. I think of Dirty Dancing. There are so many of them. It's like late 50s, early 60s dance tunes and things like that. And it's like the entire soundtrack is so memorable for me. And like there's mostly previously existing songs, but there are also these few songs that were recorded in the late 80s for this soundtrack that are stupendous in my mind as well. And I mean, it's like, it's funny because this movie starts off by saying, like, Baby is doing voiceover narration, Jennifer Grey's character, and she says that it's the summer of 1963, but yet I feel as though that doesn't really set in until you start to hear these songs that are playing. I mean, you hear she goes and sees all of these employees dancing, and they're dancing to "Do You Love Me" by the Contours, and she starts to kind of see what their life's all about and how different it is from hers and things like that. And I mean, so many of these songs, it's like there's a scene where basically the premise of the movie is this character Penny, played by Cynthia Rhodes, she's pregnant and she's got to have an abortion, and it's going to happen on the night of this big dance that she has to do, and it's going to be like a big paycheck for her. And essentially, Baby has to take over for her so she can get this procedure done. And that's the entire premise of the movie. And it's like, we get this scene where it's like, Patrick Swayze is teaching Jennifer Grey to dance, and they're in this empty room, this like dance studio basically, and they are lip syncing to the song called "Love Is Strange" by Mickey and Sylvia. And it's like, it's such a perfect scene. Like, you don't see, I mean, like, you wouldn't want to see it in a lot of movies, but it's like you don't see characters in movies like lip syncing and dancing to songs that are on the radio, and doing it this well, because they're kind of doing it like they're flirting with each other. And it's like, it's just like, it elevates the scene to this. It's like just this back and forth between Mickey and Sylvia in this song where they're like talking to each other. And it's like, I fucking love it, honestly. So like, obviously so not only do we have those songs that do fit the era, but like the original songs that I'm talking about, like, obviously the most popular song from this movie is probably "I've Had the Time of My Life" by Bill Medley and Jennifer Warnes. And that's the one that plays at the final dance scene where they've worked so hard to get good at this routine, and they've got to perform it in front of this giant crowd of people, and they've got to execute this big number and all these things. And I mean, like, that song is so memorable, and it's like it's got such a great sound to it, and it fits so well. I mean, it's supposed to be from the 60s, and it doesn't truly feel like it's in the 60s, but it also doesn't feel like it's in the late 80s at all. And it's like they clearly like went above and beyond to make it sound like that. And then I mean, you got like "She's Like the Wind" by Patrick Swayze. That's just kind of like a cool song. I mean, it just kind of fits well into the scene where it's featured, where Johnny and Baby are out together and all this stuff. But so overall, I love the characters in this movie. I think even the characters you're supposed to hate are very well concocted, and the people who are playing them play them well, and they really execute that whole like, oh, this is a snobby rich guy that I don't like, and he thinks he's better than everybody else and treats these dancers like shit. And Baby's basically got to understand like how this works and what is really going on, like how their differences and all the politics involved with what their interactions are like and things like that. And it's like, she doesn't, I mean, basically you just see her growth, and then you see all I mean, even Patrick Swayze's character Johnny, like he's got a lot of growth in this movie. He originally is not a fan of Baby. He doesn't want anything to do with her, and it's like they obviously fall in love and all this stuff. But it's just to me, the only reason it's like I don't know what it is about this movie. I mean, my sister and mom used to watch this when I was growing up, and I really, I wasn't as big of a fan of it when I was younger, but when I got older and I watched it, I'm like, God, this movie is like super fucking watchable. Like, I don't know what it is about it, but I truly enjoy it. And it's like, it's so much of it is music. It's so very much the soundtrack of it all that it's like, I hear these songs and it's like, oh my God, I fucking love it. You've got, I mean, so many fucking tunes that it's like, holy shit. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, I mean, I gave that an A. It's a solid movie. It's definitely worth watching. I mean, I recently did an episode on it, and it's one that I kind of hold near and dear to my heart, and I listen to the songs that are on this soundtrack all the time, and I still love them. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what I got for Dirty Dancing.
I have absolutely nothing to say about Dirty Dancing.
I kind of figured maybe you didn't. So yeah.
So I just let you go.
There you go. Yeah. So I mean, it's one of my faves. I realize it's like a chick flick, but it's I enjoy it. I like it.
As well you should.
Yes. All right. So I mean, I'll defer to you.
So I'm up to the A's finally. I've finally got there. My next one, I don't know if you've seen this or not. If you haven't, I highly recommend you check it out. But my next one is Baby Driver. Have you ever seen that?
Yep.
It stars Ansel Elgort, who has the most unfortunate name ever for a actor, I feel. Like,
oh God.
I'm really surprised that he didn't take a stage name or something.
Yeah, no shit. I mean, like I saw a guy, I was doing an episode, and one of the credits was a guy named Richard Suckle. And it's like, his name is Dick Suckle. Like, come the fuck on. Anyway, it's ridiculous.
It stars Ansel Elgort as a getaway driver for a gang of bank robber type criminals. He was orphaned at a young age, and he ended up kind of falling in somehow. They don't really go into the background other than you assume that like he got in trouble at some point. Kevin Spacey's character helped him out, and he's kind of paying off a debt by being his getaway driver for these bank robbery heists. And he's trying to pay off the debt until he can walk away, because he's actually not a bad guy. He's a good kid. He takes care of people around him, stuff like that. He's got a good heart. But as you could probably predict, at some point, the movie takes a left turn and shit gets real, and like he's got to get away, right? So, and that's kind of what it crescendos to. So the like I said, it's got Kevin Spacey as well. It also has Lily Adams as the love interest. It has John Hamm, John Bernthal, Jamie Foxx are all criminals basically that come in at different times.
I mean, it's an Edgar Wright movie, right?
It's an Edgar Wright movie. It was written and directed by Edgar Wright. The reason why this one is on here is because this kind of like what you were talking about with Boogie Nights, the music and the movie like mesh together in a way that the movie would not work without the music, right? Or it wouldn't work as well, certainly. And in fact, it's almost like it's not a musical, but it's kind of a musical in the sense that like the entire movie is like, it's almost choreographed to the beat. So like there will be like a shootout with a song going in the background, and the gunshots are like the gunshots and like movements of the actors and everything are purposely taking place like to the beat and like synchronized with the music in a really neat way. And there's even like he purposely cast a bunch of musically inclined people where he could. So like Jamie Foxx is in it. Ansel Elgort himself is like a DJ musician or something or other. At one point, you actually see Paul Williams, the musician and soundtrack guy from like a million different movies, not to be confused with John Williams, but Paul Williams is a different guy who's done a million soundtracks. He actually like writes a lot of songs though, for those things. He's one of those people, if you look into like his credits, you're like, holy shit, he wrote a lot of hits. One of those guys, like super songwriter types, But like the character though, the main character in his getaway driving, like he always has his earbuds in, and he's always got like one of the old timey iPods with the wheel. When the gangsters rob a bank and jump in the car, he like specifically selects a song, puts his earbuds in, throws it into gear, and then like an awesome chase scene ensues, right? And it's like kind of his MO, like he's always living his life to like a beat. And you find out that the reason he always has his headphones in is because he has some condition where like he has this ringing in his ear from a car accident that he got in when he was a child, which is where his parents died, all this. So like he has earbuds in all the time to kind of drown it out. And he's like partially deaf, so he reads lips. So he doesn't even need to be listening to people. He just reads lips, and like he's kind of a savant. But it's a super fun movie. The car chases are awesome. Like I said, the way that the music integrates with the actual choreography of the scenes is like amazing. The sound editing is super good. It's super entertaining. It's a super fun watch. I highly, highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Great action romp. One note of trivia, because I did watch a couple of the special features. I picked up the Blu-ray just for this project because I wanted to watch it on like, good speakers and all that kind of stuff. Because the only other time I had watched it was on an airplane with headphones. And one of the extra features, they're talking about the different actors that were in it, and they're talking about Kevin Spacey. And he says, "It's fun to see Kevin be bad. You love him no matter how mean he is." And I think to myself, that line didn't age well.
No, it did not. God, I have that feeling literally every time I talk about like a Kevin Spacey movie that I enjoy, that it's like, God, I wish Kevin Spacey didn't turn out the way he turned out, because, I mean, I like a lot of his movies.
Right. So, yeah, there's also the old-timey iPods, like, have this, like, weird nostalgia feel as he, like, pulls one out and starts clicking through the list, that little wheel. That's kind of cool. John Bernthal is excellent in it. He's only in it briefly, but he plays a very John Bernthal-like character. He's just really good at being, like, a jerk, Right. He's kind of a cartoonish dick in the scene that he's in, but it works perfectly. There's what else did I have written down here? Oh, great cinematography. There's really cool scene transitions that they do. Yeah. So overall, though, again, I think I've said it about 5 times now, but it's a fun movie. It's a really fun movie. And they even like change the volume within it to like, they turn it up when it needs to be turned up, and then they turn it down to be in the background. And it just, again, it just, they just nail it. So apparently it was a bit of a passion project for Edgar Wright. He had been wanting to do this for years, and then kind of finally it all came together for him. Yeah. I give it an A. I think it's excellent.
Yeah, I liked it. I like that one a lot. I think it's Edgar Wright, honestly, he's got a lot of faves of mine. Like I really like Edgar Wright, and
Hot Fuzz.
Right, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead. I mean, he even did that movie. I don't know if you would have seen this, but it's The Last Night in Soho, and it's a bit of a like almost a horror movie. It's got like, yeah, I mean, it's a little ridiculous. It's got Anya Taylor-Joy and Diana Rigg and like just random people, but I mean, it's an interesting movie. I mean, it wasn't like an all-time fave, but it was definitely enjoyable.
Now, by the way, I think earlier I said Lily Adams for some reason. It's Lily James.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where I got that. Yeah, what else has Edgar Wright done? There's another one that for some reason isn't coming to mind.
I mean, there's At World's End. There's...
Did he do Scott Pilgrim? No. Yeah.
Yeah,
he directed Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which your sister, my wife, absolutely despised. I thought it was excellent.
I know she did. See, that was the funny thing, is like that one is one that I almost put on this list, but it was like I couldn't, like, the songs, I don't know, like as much as I enjoy them while I'm watching it, it's like it wasn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
They don't always hit the same way for me, so I struggled to leave it off the list.
That could have been a good one for this list.
Yeah, because she texted me, Michelle did, about that movie. She's like, I watched Scott Pilgrim, and she was like, it was very not good, like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter levels of not good. And I was like, maybe I need to check out Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter then, huh?
Yeah, I think her exact words to me were, "That was the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life."
Jeez.
Yeah, she wasn't a fan.
Like
But
this.
that's all I got to say about Baby Driver. All right, what's the top of your list? The cream of the crop.
The tippy top of my list could only be this movie for this topic. Forrest Gump from 1994.
I wondered if that was going to creep in.
Starring Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Gary Sinise, and Sally Field. And I don't know if I could name any other actor that is in this movie other than those four. Like, this is not one of those ones that people are just coming out of the woodwork and they're really famous faces before they were stars and stuff. Like, it's just like these limited people. But so, brief synopsis: a man with a lower than average IQ goes through life while directly or indirectly involved with major world events while being largely unaware of their cultural significance. And I don't know, that's a paraphrase of a synopsis I saw for this movie a while back on like cable or something, and it was just the description, and it was like, I guess that does sum it up pretty much. But
Haley Joel Osment.
Oh, yeah, shit, I forgot he was in this movie. Fuck. Anyway, so I mean, I would say Forrest Gump is probably in my top 10 all time. I fucking love Forrest Gump. There's so much to love about it. It's just got an off the wall plot. I mean, you just see this guy doing all of these weird different things throughout his life, and just he has such an interesting life. And it's like the music really helps. I would say the biggest thing for this movie with the music is that it's basically showing you the passage of time and in what era you're viewing, you know, what you're seeing on screen. It's like, oh, okay, so this is the 50s because Elvis is playing, you know, this is the 70s because Fleetwood Mac is playing, you know, like, I mean, things like that. So it's like, it not only has a great soundtracks, but it's just, they immerse you in the scenes. Like, it's like, you get the scenes, like, I mean, like, I can't not think of All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix or For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield and not think of like the scenes in the Vietnam War in this movie. And it's just like, it's what I associate them with so heavily. And I realize that they're, you know, especially For What It's Worth is pretty much considered like a war type song. And it's like, it's just, but I mean, my God, I just fucking love the way they do it. So, I mean, like, we get a scene early on where Forrest is in all of these, he's in these leg braces, and I've never heard of, I don't know if that's not a thing anymore, if that's like a thing that was more prevalent in the 50s, but I've never heard of somebody having braces on their legs for any reason. And he's talking to, his mother runs this boarding house, and he meets this guy who we're to assume is Elvis. And Forrest does this little dance for him, and then later on, Forrest sees Elvis on TV, and he does a little version of the dance that Forrest was doing, and the mother is just horrified and blah, blah, blah. But Forrest goes through all of these trials and tribulations. You know, he becomes a star college football player, and essentially it like works to his advantage at every turn that he doesn't question anything. He doesn't really, his overall, like, his mind does not work the way most people's minds work, where it's like they want to question stuff, they want to think critically. It's like he's just doing things, he's just doing what he's told, and that's it. And it's like they hand him a football and he has to get to the other end zone, and he just runs it, and he is super fucking fast. And it's like it's really entertaining. I mean, like, he goes to the military, same thing, you know, he's not questioning anything, and they're like praising him for what a good soldier he is, because he's just doing what he's supposed to as quickly as he can, and he's just getting it done. And then, of course, the whole movie it's going to have Jenny, who Forrest meets when he's a kid and he is in love with, and basically we see the shittier side of history with her, or like the less mainstream side of history, where he's going and he's meeting presidents and things like that, but she's going and she's getting involved in the counterculture movement, and she's getting into drugs and things like that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, like, when they show him meeting presidents and they drop him into like famous news clips and things like that. Like, that was like kind of weirdly revolutionary at the time. I recall that was a big deal, the way they so seamlessly were able to put him into scenes with like Richard Nixon and stuff.
Right. And I mean, it does. I mean, it's definitely, when you watch it today, there are things that it's like, yeah, okay, that's definitely of its time special effects. Cause I mean, like their mouths, especially if you watch the way they move, where they inserted them into these clips, it's like their mouths are moving and it looks very cartoonish and weird. But I mean, I guess like that reminds me, now that you said that, there's a moment where I think he's on the Dick Cavett show and John Lennon is on there. And honestly, like for me, it's probably like I should enjoy it, but to me, it's like the dumbest part of the movie where basically Forrest Gump just feeds John Lennon. He's like basically just making him say the words to the song Imagine by John Lennon. And it's like, it's just, to me, I watch it and I'm like, that's fucking stupid. Like, that's just fucking, why did you do that? He's like, he's talking about his experiences, and John Lennon's like, oh, and no religion too? And it's like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like, get the hell out of here.
I have that feeling when the scene where he starts running back and forth across the country, and like he comes up with the shit happens bumper sticker, and they hand him a t-shirt to wipe his face, and it's like a smiley face, you know? I'm like, come on.
Right.
Now you're going a little overboard now.
Right. Because I mean, it's like, it's funny because like this movie, it can have a great sense of humor, but stuff like that, I'm like, nah, I don't really like that. Like, that's not great. You see him, he's doing his running after, you know, he plays ping pong. He competes internationally as a ping pong player. And he goes and he eventually just decides to start running one day, and he's running all over. And, you know, you get On the Road Again by Willie Nelson. You get Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. And it just, the music does so much to serve these scenes, to provide like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're at. And there's just so much history. Like, I didn't understand. Like, I liked this movie a lot when I was a kid. And when the movie came out, it was like, holy shit, this is really great. It's funny, but you know, it's got the seriousness to it. But it's like, when I was a kid, I didn't fucking understand anything in this movie. Like, I didn't understand a fucking word of it. Like, it's like, I didn't know about Watergate. I didn't know about the Vietnam War. I didn't know about any of this shit. Yeah. And it's like, he's talking about, you know, like he basically is the one that calls the police on the Watergate scandal.
Yeah.
And it's like, when I watched that, I was like, what the fuck's happening? What's the big deal with these guys that are looking around with flashlights and stuff? But I mean, I overall, I enjoy the movie. It's just, it's funny because I read something, or I saw like maybe it was like a TikTok or a reel or something the other day. It was like Tom Hanks was doing a podcast or a radio show, and he was talking about how they were going to make a sequel to this movie, and they had it all written, and they had it all like pretty much to the point that they were about to shoot it. And it was going to get shot like right after 9/11 happened. And essentially everything he said that was like going to be in the movie, he was just like, I don't think that this is going to work. Like, this is not, like, for some reason, everybody that was involved with it was just like, yeah, this is not a movie that we need to make. And it's like, I didn't realize that. Like, I had never heard that before. But I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm glad they didn't, because it's easy to fall into the trap of a cash grab, especially for something like that the movie spans decades.
Oh, yeah.
So would a remake, or not a remake, but a sequel, like, just span the next couple of years? Like, they ended it at the modern day.
Yeah, right. And I mean, that's the thing, is like, I don't know, you know, they didn't get all the way into it, but it was, I mean, what I always find funny about this movie, and my sister can attest to this, like when we would watch this movie when I was younger, it was like the scene where Jenny says that she has some kind of virus, and you're to assume that it's AIDS, right?
Yeah, I thought it was AIDS.
Right. And so, but it's never actually spelled out in the movie. It's just, you're supposed to gather that it's AIDS, you know? And it's like, my mom always said, well, no, they didn't have AIDS then. You know, like that.
In the
AIDS
90s?
No, it was like, I mean, it would have been, I think it was supposed to be like the late 80s.
I thought by the end of the movie, it was supposed to be modern day, like 1994.
It could, I mean, it might have been, but like, basically, the long story short, she was getting the impression that the time period in which it was, but basically it was like she says in the scene that she doesn't know what, like, they don't know what this virus is. So it's like, yeah, it's AIDS, but they don't know what it is because it's early enough on that they don't recognize it. This movie, I mean, it'll always hold a special place in my heart, despite its
according to ScreenRant.com, the writer confirmed that she did die of AIDS.
Okay.
Jenny did.
I mean, that's,
so there you go.
that was the thing. I mean, like, we tried telling my mom that this is what she had AIDS. Like, come the fuck on. Like, how would she not have had AIDS? Like, it's the only thing that would make sense. So,
though a different website says it may have been hepatitis C, I'm going to go with what the writer said.
I'm going with the more mainstream, popular.
Yeah, sorry to transition, but speaking of Forrest Gump, right? Like, it was speaking of it being 1994. That was such an amazing year for movies.
Oh yeah,
and music in general. Like, I've often joked that, like, in my opinion, 1994 was like the ultimate year for movies and music. But are you aware of
Pulp Fiction, Shawshank Redemption?
So Forrest Gump won Best Picture that year, the Oscar, and it beat out Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption. Like,
right.
That's a trio of movies right there that most other years don't even come near, right?
No, usually what I see, even when they have like 10 movies in the nominees, it's like most of the movies I'm like, I wouldn't even like suggest somebody watch that movie, like to just like pass the time, you know, like usually it's like such a disappointment or something.
Yeah.
But with that band of, I mean, like, I think like maybe 4 Weddings and a Funeral was in that group too, but it's like
Quiz Show.
Yeah.
Those are the 5.
So it's like, wow. Yeah.
But Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption, like, you can make a case for 3 of the movies out of the 5
easily
as being, you know, best of the decade, let alone of that year.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's what I got. It's an S rating for me on Forrest Gump. I really love it. It's one of my all-time faves, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I wouldn't refute your S rating, despite a couple of those scenes you mentioned that are kind of silly. Like, I think it's hard, at least having been alive when this movie came out, right? And like being into movies and stuff, like it's hard to downplay like the cultural impact Forrest Gump had at the time. You know?
Oh yeah.
Like, despite how good Shawshank Redemption and Pulp Fiction are, and the arguments that could be made that like those might actually be the best movie from that year,
right?
I think it's hard to separate that cultural impact with like the stuff with the blue screens that they were doing and putting him into those scenes and the way the movie spans several decades. And it was just like in a year where people were doing things that hadn't quite been done before. That was like, it was kind of a phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, well, the one thing I didn't mention in the movie is the scene that I most notably remember, like Siskel and Ebert talking about like it being a really amazing visual effects shot, is where Forrest is giving a speech at the National Mall or whatever, and like Jenny comes, there's this giant crowd of people that are all clearly digitally made, and Jenny comes walking across the reflecting pool, and it's like, holy shit, like how the fuck did they do that? It's unbelievable. And it doesn't, you know, it's seamless. Like I don't remember like in watching it, like it didn't stand out as like, oh, well, they did CGI for that or something. You know, it's like, it looks fucking great. I mean, yeah, sorry, that's all I had for that. I keep going back.
So that's your S tier. So mine, I went back and forth between a couple of different things that I almost included, and back to like what we were talking about earlier, like the criteria for the list. Would you have included musicals, like straight up musicals?
I thought about one particular musical.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, that's a gray area.
Originally, my number one S tier was going to be a musical. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, maybe that's not quite what we're going for here. But not a musical in the sense that like it's just a good musical. Like it would have still met my criteria of like a soundtrack where I would listen to the music without watching the movie. Now, granted, I was a kid at the time, but my original number one S tier was going to be The Lion King.
Okay.
Wow. But ultimately I was like, okay, I guess that's like, it's a Disney musical though. And it's kind of an outlier from the rest of the list, but I was very curious, and I didn't want to say anything ahead of time, so I was very curious to see if any musicals were going to end up on your list, like, West Side Story or something, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I probably would have had Grease on my list. Like, I'm a big enough Grease fan, but it's like, yeah, I couldn't, because it's like, to me, yeah, that's like a different topic altogether. I feel like,
yeah. So for me, I swapped out at the last minute to a different S tier movie with an amazing soundtrack, Office Space from 1999.
Okay,
starring
all right.
Ron Livingston, Jennifer Aniston, and several others in smaller roles. It's a Mike Judge movie. He wrote it. I don't know that he directed it. I don't think he directed it, did he? But I know he wrote it. Did he?
Maybe.
Hang on, we can get to the bottom of this. Oh, he did. It was written and directed by. Okay. So Office Space, you may remember when the first episode of this we did, it's the second of two movies that I saw in the theater before it was cool and told everybody how good it was and nobody believed me. But Office Space is another one of those movies that's like achieved cult classic status at this point. The soundtrack, it's not only an excellent soundtrack to just listen to, it's got a bunch of stuff from like the Ghetto Boys are on it. There's a lot of rap on it. There's a lot of other good pop songs and stuff on it. Probably the biggest highlights are Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster and Still, also Ghetto Boys, but still not so much because of the song, but because of the scene that it's in. Because this is another one where like,
oh yeah,
it's not like Dirty Dancing or Baby Driver level in the or any of those other ones, in the sense that like the entire movie is based around specific songs, and like the interplay with the music. But there are two scenes in the movie that would not be the same without the soundtrack. And one of them is the scene where, he's after he's been hypnotized. I should say, as a quick synopsis for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's essentially about a guy who hates work so much that he gets hypnotized to like think that he's somewhere else, basically. But the hypnotist dies before he wakes him up. And so he completely like just ends up blowing off work, and like hilarity ensues essentially. But there's the scene post hypnosis where he finally goes back to work and just doesn't give a shit about anything. And Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster is playing in the background as he like takes a drill and just takes apart his cubicle and knocks down the wall. So suddenly he has an office window, or a window office basically. And he's kind of checked out. He's wearing, plain clothes. He's not in like a shirt and tie or anything. He goes ahead and takes a long lunch break over at Tchotchke's and finally like asks out the waitress that he's had a huge crush on, who's played by Jennifer Aniston. And like, this whole like sequence unfolds. The other scene that's like not the same without the soundtrack is there's a scene where he steals the printer from the office, and they like do this like slow motion gang style beatdown of the printer with like baseball bats and stuff, while the Ghetto Boys play in the background of like one of the most aggressive rap songs ever, of the guy yelling "Die motherfucker die" as they like smash this. And at one point the one guy actually like tosses the baseball bat aside and starts punching the printer with like this just look of rage on his face, because it's one of the recurring jokes that it keeps jamming, and like they get error messages. And like for anybody who's ever worked in an office, even like in school or anything, like you know that feeling where the guy like he's trying to print something and it's jamming and it's giving him this error, and he goes, "PC load letter? What the fuck does that even mean?" Like,
right. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a total classic. It's got super memorable moments from like Gary Cole shows up as his boss, and Stephen Root plays Milton, this like super weird character that's like soft spoken and just goofy, that keeps appearing throughout the movie. Diedrich Bader plays this like this hilarious neighbor who's always yelling through the wall when there's this breast exam commercial comes on, because it's got a topless chick in it, and he yells through the wall, "Hey, the breast exam commercial's on, check it out, man." He
is so deadpan. Like, he is, when he comes over to talk to him, and like he asks Diedrich Bader what he would do if he had $1 million, and he just looks at him and he's like, "I'll tell you what I'd do, man. two chicks at the same time. And it's like, that's all he had. That's the only thing this guy gives a shit.
Yes.
But it's like he's dead serious. Like he is not joking at all.
Yes, because chicks dig dudes with money, and if he had $1 million, he could probably work that out.
I love when he like tries to talk him down from that line of thought, and he goes, well, women are always, and he's like, well, type of chicks that would double up on a dude like me would. It's like,
yes. It's so good. And then there's the Bobs, like the two consultants that come in to like lay people off, played by John C. McGillney, who you might know from Scrubs, a TV show, and
He's
Paul Wilson,
great.
who's like been in a million different things. I think he played Karl Rove in the Josh Brolin George W. Bush movie, maybe.
Oh,
maybe. And he's played, I don't know, he pops up in a million things all over the place. But they play the Bobs. They're both named Bob. And then one guy who's in it, the guy that plays the character named Michael Bolton, which is itself a running joke in the movie that his name is Michael Bolton and he hates Michael Bolton. It's played by a guy named David Herman, who I don't think I've ever seen appear in anything else ever. And he's like so good in Office Space. He nails that part.
Wait, the Michael Bolton guy?
Yeah. Is he in anything else?
The only other thing I've seen him in is Dude, Where's My Car? He was in that movie as the stoner guy, like the dealer, I think, for Ashton Kutcher and Sean William Scott. Like he was, that's the only thing I can think of, though, honestly.
Well,
like,
I guess looking at his filmography, it appears he was in a bunch of other stuff. It looks like he's also primarily done a lot of voice acting. So like B-movie, Futurama, Storks, Scooby-Doo, Bob's Burgers. So so I guess he's around, just not in front of the camera, I guess. Yeah, he's so good in that role, though. When they're like, what's wrong with Michael Bolton? That's a fine name. And he's like, no, it was a fine name until that no-talent ass clown started selling records and winning Grammys. And he's like super into like hardcore gangster rap, even though he's the most square white guy you ever saw.
Because that's his big scene at the beginning of the movie. Is like he's in his car and he is jamming out to fucking hardcore rap music, and he sees the guy coming down the street that's gonna like I don't know.
He's selling flowers like going window to window in the traffic jam, and he like turns it way down and it's like rolls up his window.
Yeah. Right. And it's like, oh my God, it's so fucking great. Oh man. I really do love that one.
It's such a good movie. I mean, I can't imagine anyone listening to this hasn't seen Office Space, but like if you haven't seen Office Space, you've got to do yourself a favor and watch Office Space. It's one of the greatest movies of all time, in my opinion. Definitely an S tier, great soundtrack. The supporting cast kind of like makes the movie with all the little goofy characters that you see in the movie. It's it's a very Mike Judge movie, with goofy little characters and stuff. Really, really witty, really, really good. I don't have any bad things to say about Office Space. One of my favorite movies of all time. S tier all the way. That's all I've got to say about that.
I'm very astounded that Boogie Nights was not your S tier movie, just based on what I know about your movie taste.
I thought about it, but I wasn't sure if we might actually end up doing like a P.T. Anderson list at some point. Right. But I was glad that you brought it up because it gave me a chance to rant and rave about how wonderful it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was arguably my biggest struggle with this whole thing, was like having done episodes. Like there were movies I left out that I had done episodes on, or, I've already recorded them and haven't released them. And I'm like, I'm going to be retreading all of the same material and same stuff to talk about, I mean? So I was like, all right, I'll do a few that I've already talked about, or that I, and just give in.
Yeah. So with that, like, speaking of stuff we didn't talk about, I mean, to talk about also mentions, again, for if this is your first time tuning in, we don't say honorable mentions because we're including stuff that's terrible.
Right.
So also mentions, like I have a laundry list of movies that I considered covering. At one point I had mentioned documentaries. I almost covered a documentary because there's this really good Joe Strummer documentary called The Future is Unwritten. And the soundtrack was released as a separate CD. And it's not just Joe Strummer and Clash songs. It's also like songs that inspired Joe Strummer through his life. So like there's other things on there. There's Woody Guthrie is on there. Tim Harden's on there. Really good soundtrack. And it's an excellent documentary. But again, that one, it kind of felt weird being like, a documentary about a musician. Like, it felt like cheating.
Yeah.
So I dropped that one out. But then there's movies like The Wall by Pink Floyd. That was another one that I wasn't sure if that would really fit. But obviously, the movie that goes along with the album, The Wall, is...
So, wait, I got to ask you that question then, because I'm assuming you've seen it, and it's... Is it a movie that I most definitely need to be on LSD to enjoy, or...
I don't think so, because I watched it in high school, and none of me or my friends were like into that, smoking pot or anything. We all watched it stone sober, and a couple of my friends were like obsessed with it. Like they loved it. I think it's excellent. If you like Pink Floyd, it's worth checking out because it's got a whole bunch of really weird, like you said, like if you're on LSD or something, I imagine that it would be like, you'd probably freak out, honestly, because there's like, I don't think you need to be, because it almost like the movie itself kind of simulates like you're on drugs or something, because there's a bunch of really weird animated sequences and everything. It's full of like symbolism and stuff too. So, there's less a script so much as like a series of almost music videos that kind of tell a story. It's very conceptual. But like one of the movies we talked about previously, so I didn't cover it, but Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Coen Brothers. That's got a really great soundtrack. I mentioned scores, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the score by Howard Shore. Excellent. Then there's movies like The Matrix had a great soundtrack. Beavis and Butthead Do America was very close to making my list. Very, very close. Mallrats has an excellent soundtrack. The Wedding Singer I almost included.
Oh, and, that's a good one.
On the same, actually, that was your sister's idea. She mentioned that when I almost did it. That was kind of like when you were talking about Team America. There's like songs that Adam Sandler wrote just for the movie.
Right.
that are hilarious, like when he's singing about his ex-fiance and he's like, I hope you fucking choke.
Yeah.
Right. He's like all drunk and everything. There's a movie called Crossroads starring Ralph Macchio. Oh, who's the girl that's in it?
It's Jamie Gertz.
Yes, Jamie Gertz. That's one of my all-time favorite movies. I ultimately didn't include it on the list, but not to be confused with the Britney Spears movie of the same name. This one is excellent. A lot of really good blues guitar and stuff.
Now, hold on just a fucking minute. What are we trying to say about the Britney Spears movie Crossroads with Zoe Saldana? Come on.
I would say you might want to watch that. I haven't seen it. It's not the movie I'm talking about. That's all.
Okay.
That's all.
That's fair.
If you rent that movie expecting some super good blues guitar and Ralph Macchio, you're not going to get that.
That's fair. That's reasonable.
A potential S tier that I almost included, Snatch.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's a really good soundtrack and one of my favorite all-time movies, Guardians of the Galaxy, 8 Mile. And then I've got and in general, like I had mentioned, The Lion King, but like all the Alan Menken Disney movies.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like we could have just done a list of those, honestly.
Right, like
that
honestly,
could be its own list.
Yeah, it could be its own episode. Like, I mean,
Disney
fucking
musicals.
love those.
And then I had a short list of movies, like I had mentioned, that had like one monstrous single off it, but I didn't know anything else about the rest of the soundtrack or whether it was even any good. So like there was Cool Runnings, which you mentioned earlier when I was talking about Jimmy Cliff. Speaking of Jimmy Cliff and Jamaicans, Cool Runnings has the song I Can See Clearly Now.
Oh yeah,
which is Jimmy Cliff.
Right.
Excellent song. The Three Musketeers had the Bryan Adams, Sting, and somebody else, the All for One and All for Love song.
Oh God. Yeah,
it was Bryan Adams, Sting, and Rod Stewart, maybe. Anyway, that was an excellent one because I love me some Bryan Adams. I don't care what anybody else says. Titanic and the Celine Dion one. A Star Is Born, the latest one with the Shalalalalo song, super good song. Dangerous Minds had the Coolio song, but I looked up the soundtrack and wasn't that impressed with the rest of it.
No, yeah, I was going to say.
There's a movie from way back in the day called Rush that I never saw, but I think that's where the Tears in Heaven song came from, Eric Clapton. I'm not sure if that was like originally on an Eric Clapton album or if that was originally from that soundtrack. But
I don't know.
That was a great song, a very sad song, but a great song.
Oh, yeah.
And then I also had an also mention to Breakfast at Tiffany's for inspiring the most excellent song by Deep Blue Something in 1995. That's my list of also mentions.
Okay, I mean, you kind of stole a bunch of mine, but I will say one that I almost considered putting on this list that I couldn't not put it in S tier if I selected it is the 1989 film Batman, which we already kind of talked a little bit about. And
Yep.
I mean, honestly, like that's one. And actually, in a couple weeks, the episode will come out, so it'll be before this. But I already kind of talked about it in the episode. But basically, like the Prince songs in that movie, it's like I like Prince. I think that they were like the worst choice to put in that Batman movie because they make it feel so dated and weird at times. You know, like they just have these entire scenes where it's like they're doing a music video for a Prince song. You know, they're not really in the movie. It's like I don't know, but 8 Mile is one I was going to mention. I almost put it on my list because I was, you know, when I first got into rap music way back when, and I've since fallen out of love with rap music, I really went all in on 8 Mile and I thought it was great. But it's also one of those ones that I would say like less than half of what is on that album is stuff that I would like actually enjoy listening to.
Out of
But
curiosity, where might you rank 8 Mile? Because I have feelings
um,
on 8 Mile.
so I would put it like if I were ranking it on this list, I would have probably put it at that D spot, honestly.
Okay, so I think you and me are on the same page then, because I remember when that movie came out, I was a sophomore in college, and it was huge. Like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we were like the demographic for that movie, right?
Right.
A bunch of white guys who like all my roommates were like from Novi, and they grew up like right down the street from 8 Mile, not the same part of 8 Mile, mind you, but
Right.
like Eminem was the big thing. So we were like definitely in that demographic. And like, I remember that movie came out and the soundtrack was great and everybody was always listening to that song, but the movie itself was so stupid. And I get in arguments with my roommates and friends and so I'd be like, guys, come on.
It's not.
They're
I
like,
mean, it's so
they're
bad.
serious about their rap battling. And
Well,
stuff. It's
like
so dumb.
it's like this. Like, what is the actual like the story in that movie is just that Eminem has to do these rap battles, but that's kind of secondary because he's trying to get a record deal. But it's like the whole thing is just like fucking useless, and it's
And
like
he just walks around with that dumb look on his face the whole time.
right. And I mean, yeah,
I mean,
it's just bad.
It had its moments in that movie that were kind of fun, but I just remember like I was like, am I really the only guy here that is willing to admit this movie's stupid? Like,
Right. Yeah, I agree. And the other one I was going to mention that it was like the first soundtrack I ever owned, and it is the Space Jam soundtrack. And that was a fucking loaded soundtrack. I loved that soundtrack.
What was
Fucking
on
great.
that?
Well, it had I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly, of course.
Oh, right. I Believe I Can
Yes.
Fly. Oh, man. Talk about somebody who is like really aged well.
Oh, no shit. Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, it had like Seal had a cover of Fly Like an Eagle by Steve Miller Band. And oh my God, there was like Method Man songs. Like, I mean, just a bunch of random shit. Oh, like, what's that one? That's the way, I like it, that was on there. Oh man, I could get so fucking pumped to that album. But yeah,
Wow.
I mean, for scores, I mean, I'm going to pick the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm going to pick a myriad of superhero related things, especially Batman. But I mean, yeah, I think honestly, scores would be a separate episode as well. It'd be like, what are good orchestral scores that would really fit?
Yeah, I'm not enough into those scores though to probably be able to come up with a good list, but that's what I thought about. I briefly considered it, but I do have a great a story though. Speaking of the Batman score, back in like probably 2007, went to a Tigers game with a friend of mine that I worked with, and it was me and a couple other friends. He was driving, and we were coming back, and thank goodness he was sober because of what he ended up doing. But at one point we were like driving through 696, I think it is, with like all the tunnels that goes through Detroit, right?
Oh, yep.
And he turned it on, and he had an Acura something or other, I forget what, but it was like a really fast car. And he put on the Batman theme, like the score, the Danny Elfman score, and he cranked it like super fast and was driving like 120 miles an hour down the highway through these tunnels and everything.
Oh,
and it was
God.
like midnight. And so there wasn't that many cars on the road. It's a miracle he didn't get pulled over or anything, but like it was awesome. It felt like we were in the Batmobile for a minute.
There
It
you
was
go.
so cool. But yeah, that's my little side story of the Batman Danny Elfman score.
Fair enough.
So yeah, that's all I got to say about that. This was a fun one because I love talking about music as much as I love talking about movies. And this gave us a chance to do both.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun one. We'll have to figure out what our next one will be on.
Yeah. Till next time.
Yeah, right. All right. I guess have a good rest of your day, everybody. Bye now. Brandon at Random Reviews is written, recorded, produced, edited, and engineered by Brandon Griffiths. The theme music is performed by Augusto Diniz and was acquired by way of Fiverr.com.